Oh, I'm so curious to see how this experiment's gonna end. It's gonna be so much fun. Everyone's loving it now, and my organizy brain likes it, but somehow it feels like AOS 1, the rules were somehow liberating in a
Mm.
way. The fact it's simple, it's this, and then they clarified it a little bit. With this, I'm kind of like, this looks really good now. Let's wait a year. I don't
Well,
know. I don't want to be pessimistic.
I think some healthy pessimism is always in order with a new thing. Like, be the cautious optimism. Like, be like, I think that's just, you don't want to be like, we talk about like hot take culture and how it's like really easy to like hot take something, and like negativity really feeds the like YouTube algorithms and Twitter. Like, all of
Yeah.
social media is built off of the engagement out of negativity. It's all built off of that. But there's also like a positivity bias where you can set yourself up to be a sucker, and you don't want to do that either. Like, so it's, I say, and this is to have that sort of emotional, allow yourself to enjoy the emotional first blush reaction, even lean into it a little bit. But then once you have that, then you got to step back and kick in the higher brain faculties that, like, well, let's see where this will go, or the problem is some people just get caught in like the hot take loop, and they never divorce from that. They never take a breath and reassess the situation. They live Twitter post to Twitter post, feed to feed, and it's just, when you're in that mode. And this is a life lesson, dear Chacking. I see you showing up already. Like, just unplug sometimes, right? Step back, whatever that means to you. Take a step back and reevaluate. I'm even more than cautiously optimistic about 3.0. I haven't given much thought to like just the bulk of rules, but I'm a like rules guy. I have to wonder what that means for other people who aren't, though. I'm very much a Johnny. I look at rules and I see puzzles and I wonder how this all fits together, and I really like that. I'm the person who, when I get a Dungeons and Dragons like new book, I immediately flip to the feats and see what combos stack with like the feats that I were in the previous book. Like, I'm that type of person. And you have people who like, don't even look at that stuff. They're jumping for like the narrative tidbits, and like a lot of
Yeah.
people's brains consume different stuff. I don't think people who seek to consume rules a bunch are the majority, though. So, like,
I really want to get my hands on those stats. I really do, because this has been a long time discussion. People say, oh, because you have competitive people and then you have rules people, and that's not a complete overlap, right?
right?
Yeah.
And then you have a sort of a gradient of story slash role play oriented people, which is kind of the narrative part. But there's a big gradient, and I don't know. I would really love. I don't know if they have any information on this, GW or anyone, but I would really love to see what the numbers are, because I would like to put the discussion to rest, because people seem to say, well, but that's all we hear out in the internet. That's true, but maybe no, maybe the silent majority isn't talking. We
Right.
have
Well,
no clue.
It's so much easier to have a conversation about rules than it is about narrative. Like, it's so much easier to be that rule is wrong than like this story arc is XYZ. Like, it's so much like I was an English lit major. The first 200 level course you're supposed to take is something called, at my university, was something called analyzing texts. Okay, what is a text? Everything's a text. Like, that's the first thing my teacher said, is like, well, what is a text? A film can be a text. A script is obviously a text. Like, rules are text. Like, what's a text? Everything's a text. So, analyzing texts, learning to do a critical read through of things is a skill you are not born with, especially with narrative. Rules are surface level. You can look at a rule and go,
but
I know where to
but
put this. Go ahead. I'm
but
sorry.
life is storytelling. Like,
It
this is
is.
why storytelling is so important to marketing. Like, even though you're just trying to make a buck and sell a product, like,
Yeah.
there's still
Well,
branding is storytelling. So
well, yeah. Look at the rhetoric employed, and this isn't about like good bad politics, but look at the rhetoric, often used by like someone who's trying to like be elected, or someone who's trying to be public. They tell stories. They don't tell you numbers. The only
yeah,
time they really tell you numbers is when it serves the narrative. Most people have some belief or narrative they're pushing. Like, if the narrative is Coke makes you happy, right? Like, that's the thing. And so they're gonna like show people happy with the can of Coke, and they're gonna and Coke, feel free to send me money for now accidentally advertising your product. Like no, like you know, they're gonna say Coke makes you happy, and they're gonna show you a bunch of people being happy, and then like if there's a statistic that might serve that they can fit in there without like starting to feel like they're being too statsy, they'll throw that in there too. Like maybe it's on a screen behind them, Coke happiness, and it's just a little infographic. Like
Very simplified statistics.
yeah, very
Bright
often
colors.
simplified statistics, usually misleading, which is what we tend to do with numbers, is because we find numbers that conform to our narrative first and foremost. Like we don't seek numbers out in a completely divorced from anything. They're not, you know, these not platonic numbers. Like just what is the essence of the numbers of the thing, and they help us inform our narrative, but usually they start from some sort of thing that they're just like right now we're proposing like, well, I'm curious how many people identify as narrative, as rules people, as, you know, so on and so forth. Well, to even ask that study, well, what type of study are we going to do? You know, is this going to be a poll? You know, we're going to poll people. Like, okay, if we poll my audience versus we poll like Vince Venturella's audience, I bet you'll get a different swing. You know, yeah. I mean, it's totally worth thinking about. I posit simply that it's easier to talk about rules, so rules tend to dominate the conversation. And
Well, and I would agree with that in the same way that I would agree that this is where tournaments generally they provide, and Nuno and I have had this conversation any number of times. Like take Frontline Gaming's ITC and like the Best Coast Pairings app and stuff like that. Like it's an easy universal language, and I don't feel narrative play has a good universal language, and that's a little bit what we're trying to make with Animosity and with the Narrative Event Organizer Network. But we aren't there yet.
well,
But yeah, like it's very easy to discuss just straight up 2,000 point lists, run them into each other.
mm-hmm. Well, and go ahead.
My pitch to that is just clear, concise instructions the match play. In the narrative, we have modular stuff, which is really good now. It didn't used to be this modular and slot in as it was in the past. Now it's better, but you don't have a sheet of there needs to be an organizer, there needs to be a GM. This is how you put the pieces together. If you add that page, it could make an entire difference. Also, Warhammer community, framing it in the right way, and do this for like 6 months to a year can make all the difference.
Well, I think
I think.
that's exactly it. I think you got to raise the water level on people's perception of how this stuff is. I mean,
And
that's
we have
the
evidence. There's so many amazing, huge narrative events from all the Neos out there for the past 5 years, and it doesn't break the membrane. Do you see what I mean? But the evidence is there. We have all the evidence.
yeah,
They've been doing this for ages.
yeah,
Before I even got involved with
yeah,
narrative play in AOS.
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
we didn't mean to cut you off there, Mark.
No, I just wanted to say real quick, good evening from Texas, says Soren, and good evening from somewhere the Midwest, where I'm sitting. Thank you so much for that tier 3 sub. 22 years of support. Thank you so much for doing that. Chat gang's in the house. I'm, of course, the magical Mr. Mephisto, the most dangerous man in Age of Sigmar. Your loquacious lich, joined tonight by Nuno and Alex of Animosity Campaign. Just a fraction of that great team y'all have going on. How are you doing tonight, gentlemen?
I'm hanging in there.
Hanging in there.
Appreciate you asking. We're in the middle. We're in week 3 of moving, so like you can see, there's nothing in my apartment behind me because things have been migrating a bit at a time down 3 flights of stairs. So,
But I've noticed very
Shout out to your
importantly.
new house.
Yeah, shout out to the new house. Very importantly, though, you do have hobby unpacked, so like you're good.
well, well, yes, but actually no, because like this is I have my setup that I would bring to the local Warhammer store when they just fully reopened like last week, but in the before times. So like I literally have what I have left here at the apartment because we still have internet at the apartment. We don't have it at the house yet. So yeah, right now I have literally just my tools and what I'm working on. The rest of my hoard of shame is 20 minutes away.
All right, that's that's I mean you just got to respect the hustle.
Yeah.
So tonight, obviously, just everyone in chat knows, we will be talking about Animosity 3. which is the third installment of specifically Animosity, but we were talking kind of off the show about sort of the lineage of this event. So we're going to go into that again. This will be the second time I've personally talked to Alex about Animosity, and the first time I've talked to you, Nuno, about this. So I'm looking forward to that. But because I got to be me, we started talking about like narrative just kind of in the esoterica. I would like to talk about that a little bit more this time than just like, hey, here's all Animosity all the time, like we did last time. If y'all don't mind, for just to kind of give you a digital soapbox and talk about narrative, if that's all right.
Yeah. So just to jump in there, Nuno also runs the wearetheneon.com website, which stands for We Are the Narrative Event Organizer Network. So yeah, he's the perfect guy to talk to about that.
So
I am merely a custodian. I'm holding the torch for the moment.
He is very
Uh,
humble.
in a, the groundwork was already all there, and you probably know the figures. All these narrative event organizers that have been literally giving everyone an example for all these years.
Holy Wars. Steve comes to mind immediately. My first encounter with this was seeing the Neo next to his name. I'm like, what the hell is that? And then like, oh, this is what that is. Like, go to Holy Havoc, which I've been to, and it's just like my mind was blown. I have to say, being exposed to like a tournament like Steve's shifted my perspective on the hobby. It really did, because I came in from a Magic the Gathering like grinder mentality, and like, well, finish your thought. I'm sorry, I cut you off there. And people know about
No,
me.
I think that what is impressive is that they've been all the way from, I believe, 2016. I believe Steve Herner at the Holy Wars Holy Havoc, he was already doing this in Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And that's how they played in the club, and that's what he wanted to bring to the Age of Sigmar, and he definitely succeeded. And other people like jumped in as well. I mean, you saw the amazing work that the folks at the from Realms at War do. Mitzi, Jimbo, Ming, and Steve Foote, they're amazing. Aaron Bostian and Bill Costello running either at the Nova Open Grand Narrative with these huge boats, if you've ever seen any pictures. Bill Costello now is running Oasis of Flame at the LVO. So this is kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
You just have to kind of go there and find it. The narrative, you need to kind of make an investment to go there to these bigger events, but they exist.
Well,
We have loads of evidence. We have loads of pictures.
So not only that, they exist in that form, but you don't need a big event with lots of flashy tables to play narrative. So we were talking about hot take culture at the top. Meth, can I give my hot take on air?
Oh,
that I
by
sent
by all
you,
means, by all means.
all right, let me.
I got to preface it. My guest hot takes may not necessarily be my hot takes, but I will
The opinions
platform
on
my
this
guests.
show do not reflect.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Get it out there. I hope the spicier the better. Let's go.
All right. So, in my humble opinion, narrative play is more competitive than matched play, and I would add that narrative is the default way to play Games Workshop products, not matched play.
Whew. See,
I agree.
I will die on that hill.
See, that's a line in the sand right there. And
I mean, it explains the wishy-washiness of the rules.
I will call in an artillery strike on my own position. Is how I will die on that hill.
Or crack the warp stone and overcharge it. Like, yeah. So, if I may just kind of probe this a little bit of pushback, a little bit of agreement. So like, we look about like I've talked about recently that like the highest rung on my like nerd ladder is RPGs. Like, and I even kind of led with an example of when I get an RPG book. Even though I think, I was running the Best Damn Soulbound show for I think like 16 sessions live for everyone to see. You can see my style of GMing, which is the rules are more actual guidelines than rules and pretty straightforward, trying to like use the rules to facilitate essentially conflict, but then trying to like just really showcase character and story is really what but I kind of like feel like I change gears depending on what I'm playing. Like I as a RPG gamer, I'm very much I think an ROLE player as opposed to an ROLL player. But as I was starting to get into with Magic the Gathering, tournament play especially, like there's a prize. I show up, I want that prize. I don't even want the prize. I want the validation. Like I don't the prize is like just the crystallized form of my validation to say, "See, look at this." And so I go into a little bit of a different gear. I wonder, do other people have as like pronounced a shift? Are more people like more, sort of like agrarian or like you know diverse or more of a spectrum in how they do this? Like what when you say narrative play is the best or is the default of Warhammer, can you elaborate and maybe like contextualize that? Because we do line up to play a game where somebody wins and the current landscape is you can win a prize that like says, "Hey, see, look at how good you Warhammered." Like, how do we measure how good you narratived, right?
I mean, I think you measure that by the war stories you remember and tell afterward, because we had an old I introduced an old Animosity player to Age of Sigmar. I ran a demo game for him when I visited him in Boston, and he started ranting to the Games Workshop store manager about something that had happened in a campaign like almost 10 years ago, and like he was still furious about it. Like, do you, when you're 10 years removed from a tournament, like, do you care really that much? Like, do you really remember it? Like, it's like I said at the top, stories are part of the human condition. It's
Yeah.
stories are the important bit.
Yeah.
And to me, where you ranked on your best coast pairings or whatever in an ITC, cool story, bro.
Well,
When you named your model, it hurts for longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you let's say you're in the mission to conquer the I don't know the whatchamacallit tower of something,
yeah,
you
the
will remember
whatchamacallit tower
that
of something.
more
I'm
than
I'm writing that down in the notes. The whatchamacallit tower of
there
something.
you go.
Go on.
It's
Yeah,
official now.
yeah.
Well, like,
You will remember that more because I think there's a bigger buildup, right? You're not just fighting another game. There's like ancillary objectives and things that maybe there's a campaign around it, and then even the defeat is branded more into your brain.
Interesting.
It is
So,
for everyone, of course.
Caleb Kane here in chat says something really interesting. Says, "I once heard you play narratively, you game competitively." Not that that adds
Hmm.
anything, but it is worth. Like
Yeah.
I guess from my
Can do
point,
that. It's compatible.
yeah. For my main take is that there's sort of like multiple spheres of Warhammer that kind of make up Warhammer. Like it's more of a spectrum. And it's not necessarily a linear spectrum. It's more like overlapping spheres of interest, right? And I think I don't think there's any one person that is fully one thing or another. Even the purely competitive player, if they're in Age of Sigmar, something got them here, and I would posit it is some narrative element. It's either their friends or it's a narrative element. Because if you're purely concerned about competitive, there is better competitive games out there to measure how good of a competitor you are. Even within the context of like wargaming and tabletop gaming and so on and so forth. There's a lot of venues to sort of test your mettle. I don't think you come here for like the low hanging fruit because it's easy to like, pub stomp loser Warhammer players who don't know how to play the game. Like I think
I mean,
you'd go to any
I
store and there's always someone who's going to pub stomp you and turn. Go on. Sorry, I want.
I was gonna say I think that's exactly why a lot of people play Warhammer, is because it's not a good competitive game. But if you can break it, then when little Jimmy comes into the friendly local game store and he's just excited to push his models around, you crush him off the table and you can feel good about that. I think Warhammer attracts a lot of people like that who aren't
Interesting.
they don't really want to compete, because, at least speaking from personal experience, the moment it looks like they're going to lose the game, not that they have lost, just they're down on points on like turn 3 or something, and then they're whinging about how their book is broken and Games Workshop doesn't love Daughters of Cain, and it's just been so.
Mm.
Story.
Well, I mean, there's I think there's some truth to that. Everyone knows the stereotype of that guy, like the archetypal that guy, and not necessarily male female thing, just the that guy colloquially, right? Like there's a type of person like that. I don't think that's the majority of Warhammer players by any stretch, though. Again, like if you're in it for just competing, there's other stuff to compete in, to test your mettle, to see how good of a competitor you are. If you're in it for crushing noobs, I mean,
Well,
there's that in everything. Like
can I?
Go ahead.
So, if you want to test your mettle and see how good a competitor you are, come play Animosity campaigns.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm.
Can you
That's
give us
my
the
hot
quote
take.
again? Just
Wait,
the
wait,
quote again from
Yeah, I
what
once heard you play
Captain. What was his
narrative.
name?
Yeah, so Caleb said, I once heard you play narratively, you game competitively. So that was
yeah.
the quote. And I mean, I think that's you need to ruminate on that a moment, Nuno.
I kind of agree. To be honest, I think if you have a campaign or an event or whatever that has narrative ancillary objectives, or I can give you an even better idea. It's all matched play battle plans, but the table actually has the objectives where the objectives are. There's a temple, there's a portal, whatever,
Oh,
right?
okay, I see what you're saying.
And you're playing all in the same realm, so all the tables are themed to that. That to me is narrative enough. Yes, I'll be stomped by someone who can play it better. The experience it gives me,
Uh-huh.
at least, is the reason why I go to the game.
Yeah,
I go to experience I'm pushing my models around. I'm a general doing stuff in this place, is to live in the world of the Age of Sigmar.
yeah,
That's at least my my interest in the game. But of course, as we know, different demographics have different interests
right,
in the game. But
right.
I think they can overlap, and this would be a way that it would overlap for me. Like with no rules, huh? All just by how you put the terrain and which special rules you decide to include in the event.
Yeah.
It'll
So,
be a
something that was a real learning moment for me was the first campaign I ran for my local games workshop after they opened. And it was the last day of the campaign, and we were playing Firestorm, the Firestorm supplement that Games Workshop came out with a few years back. And one of the things you can do is you can get what's called a Scepter of Flame, but you have to win battles in like a specific number of territories in a specific order before you can unlock this artifact. And like we had this one player who on a sliding scale of that guyness, like he is pretty far along being that guy, but it
Like
became
the
very
that
important.
guy continuum, like we all start
Yeah.
out somewhere and we just become more and more that guy as yeah.
Yeah, so he's not the most that guy I've played against locally, but he's up there. But it became very important to him. Like I want that Scepter of Flame, and like this is it's this wasn't a ranking in a tournament. It was like this is a magical, imaginary magical artifact. Like I get no prize. There's nothing, but I want that Scepter of Flame.
Yeah.
And like he blitzed out several games on the last day of the campaign in just this last ditch effort to get a Scepter of Flame for his army.
That's fantastic.
And
if you make
in the
uh,
last game of the event, he did manage. He pulled it out and unlocked his artifact.
Well,
And I'm like,
that's
this is a really competitive person who became very motivated by a completely narrative objective.
yeah.
all you need is the narrative objectives. If you make the incentive narrative thing instead of just being that self-contained game, will scratch that competitive itch.
Yeah.
It just shifts it from just the self-contained game and the absolute detail crunchiness of the rules. You can still make use of them to get to that objective, but it stops being, oh, my ranking in the ITC, to I'm gonna get that artifact and I'm gonna destroy all of you.
So while you're talking here, I'm reminded of a conversation I had with Tom Lyons from Warhammer Weekly. Um, it was about painting, and he said by including paint in the paint score, you force me, a gamer, like to use our analogy earlier on, right? Like you force me to have to become good at painting if I want to win. And I think that narrative works
Mm.
similar and actually more easily because like we were talking about at the top of the thing, you're just giving people a reason to play within that framework of the game that already exists. Giving people a reason is a powerful thing. I'm kind of doing a devil's advocate thing here. I'm a freaking writer. Like um, I've made money writing stories. Gosh darn it! Like I can call myself that. Like even if I don't
Yeah.
consider myself good, but I'm a writer. I went for English lit. Like I think stories mean something on every level. I think narrative is perhaps the
Yeah.
most important aspect of the human condition. Like, we've been essentially telling each other stories since the dawn of mankind with cave paintings. Like, they analyze these and they're like, wait, are these like, are these allegories, are these things? And it's like they equate to like basically primordial man, like dick pics and just like jokes with each other is what most of them like.
That I also think that's true. Yes, it's not religious significance. No, it's probably the dick pic or something.
Yeah, no,
I agree.
no, they've done studies. There's some there's an anthropological discovery relatively recently, probably for me that's probably about the last 10 years, where like they were looking at these like cave paintings and they wondered why they got higher and higher, and like they were able to like sort of put together like the why, and it was really like these sort of almost pre-language humans were just trying to draw the picture the highest up on the cave wall. That's it. They had this game of just trying to like draw the picture higher. And you think about like now even me now telling you that the audience, the sort of like proverbial you, like telling everybody that. I have constructed a narrative to implant that factoid in your mind. I was funny and flippant early by mentioning dick pics because ha 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 humor, and then like now you have this like little factoid, and that's you have to hold that. That rattles around in your brain forever. Somewhere out there, some cave humans, Homo sapien sapien, went and drew just a literal dick measuring contest in a cave. That's they did that. That goes back as far as humanity, like and that's just telling each other in their little tribal communities like this silly story, this joke, right? Like that was it. There wasn't a huge impactful cultural deification, nothing like that. It was just this simple exchange of like this narrative with each other and just trying to one up. And I think giving, there was no trophy. It was just the bragging rights of those individuals at that time, just trying to like see who could get the highest up the cave wall with their drawing of like a horse.
Probably there was a ladder involved. There was engineering,
Yeah.
and they came home and bragged to their parents and their friends.
Yeah.
So if I could step back to something you said a moment ago,
Yeah.
if I may,
Yeah.
if you're finished with your thoughts.
Yeah, I love to pull up that piece of trivia, so I've done it now. You can go on.
Fair enough. Which you said something to the effect of like giving people a reason is powerful, and like that is, I think that's one of the core elements of what we try to do with animosity campaigns, is that so to further explore this supposed dichotomy between competitive and narrative.
I love that you clarified that, because that's the greatest. I think that's the big misnomer, is that narrative and competitive are distinct or separate, or that hobby is separate. I think that there's all this this intermarriage between all of those elements. That's what makes our game great, is all of that stuff kind of comes together.
There's very intense levels of competitiveness in the specifically hobby part of the hobby on painting. Very, very competitiveness. Yeah. And we all feel to some degree inadequate or bad or something about, I wish I could paint as well. Yeah. It affects us, right?
Yeah.
So what?
So you could even say that's already breaking the match play mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what I was going to go on to say is like that's very much what we have attempted to do with animosity campaigns, is rather than a tournament where like you go there and you're just trying to see like where you can end up on the ladder at the end of the event. You play five games and you see, what your win-loss draw is. With animosity, we try to place you in it. I don't want to say there isn't room to make up your own story and write yourself into it, because there absolutely is. That's hugely important to us. But at the same time, we're saying, this is this war here and now. This is what's important. This is what you're doing. And with our coalition figurehead model, where we have 6 player teams we call coalitions, and each coalition is led by a figurehead non-player character. Like the idea is, here's who you're fighting for, and here's who you're fighting alongside.
And the figurehead,
and this grounds you here and now, and this is what you're trying to do.
And here's your stakes, and here's your your team.
Yeah,
very important.
And losing is very much a risk. We want that to exist. There will be winners and losers.
So when you say figurehead, this is like an NPC, like a DMPC, effectively, like to use RPG vernacular. Like you're fighting for Blanche in your Pokemon Go. Like you care that Blanche wins, or Yeah, I think
Yeah.
did I just show what team I am in Pokemon Go with the only character's name I remember?
So like this time around, if you're fighting for the Idrolak, which we call the Satrapy of Valor, you're also fighting for their satrap Atressa Redhand, who is kind of Furiosa from Fury Road, but just a
Metal,
little bit.
metal. No, I like
Yeah,
it.
but it's Warhammer. You have to have some metal in there.
Well, I mean, yeah.
But there's a love story as well in there. No, no,
Yeah,
let nobody tell you that Hammer doesn't have enough love stories.
that's true. There is spurned love in there between Atressa and another figurehead. So
So I just kind of want to go back to some stuff that been kicking around in here chat.
Yeah.
Caleb once again said Sir Baldefax shows up to every game, be it narrative or not, which I assume is like their IC, their personal
yeah, it is.
character.
I was writing about Sir Baldaflax back in Animosity 1 in 2019. So yeah, I recognize the name.
Right. You either die a noob or live long enough to become that guy. That's the continuum, right?
That really is.
So Caleb says the last two animosity campaigns, I think my sole goal was to type, "It is I, Sir Baldefax, Flax, as often as I can." And I mean, look at the stakes, and just to kind of expound on that and kind of wrap it back into the premise here. And Linares, unbelievable. Thank you so much for the follow there. To kind of like wrap it back up into this, like I tend to like from my personal stance, like I tend to need some stakes beyond just the like, I was advocating for Devils a little bit, like perhaps I like Age of Sigmar because it does bring all the voices in my head together, the narrative guy, the competitive guy, like the person who used to have more art classes than real classes in his day at high school, like all that's all hanging out together here. But like if I go to an event that is purely non-narrative, like purely match play competitive, and like even the hobby scores are pretty light, they're not very weighted or they're completely separate, I'll still develop like a narrative for myself while I'm there. First off, I show up in a literal fucking persona. I'm the sort of pseudo heel, friendly guy, but like when people start cheering for my 12-inch charges, I tell them to knock that shit off, and like, you don't get excited for me, like you get mad, like I shouldn't have made that, like I still get into this persona because what you were saying, Nuno, that like the need to play the game and like connect with it and be in it. I need that. Even when I play Magic the Gathering, I play black decks a lot of black decks because I fancy myself a necromancer, and so I imagine that I'm some
Come to
necromancer
the
sitting,
team, yeah.
yeah, like sitting at the table there, raising the dead and having skeletons do my bidding. Like I'm the type of person that if I got magic in reality, I wouldn't even move my mouth to eat my food. Like I would use Mage Hand to move my jaw to chew my cereal in the morning. Like that, like I'm utterly obsessed with like stories and stuff like that. So I can't help but infuse that into the game, and I think that you reward yourself by doing a little bit. Name a model something. It can be cheeky. You can name it after, like, say, like you have a rival in the tournament scene. You don't even need to come up with like some fluffy narrative name. Name it after a person, and see how that starts to like alter your experience at
All
the
the
table.
skeleton puns. Use all the skeleton pun names possible. I
Right.
still have to do that. Like, I think there was someone, some, was it Bruce? No, it wasn't Bruce Stillman. Someone called Stillman that worked at Games Workshop that apparently he had a number of rules, and one was name all your models. Every time a single one dies, it's that much funnier.
Well,
As a
that's
name, and you're gonna feel
Yeah.
sorry or laugh,
yeah.
or both.
Well, we've talked about X because X gonna give it to you. See how he's this.
Yeah.
This is
Oh,
the gonna give it.
nice.
This is the X gonna give it to you posture. Well, I had Joel on. We were talking about Anvil of Apotheosis, and he basically made X as an Anvil of Apotheosis busted character because X was gonna have a personal story of progress where he's like he's the only Mortec who has gone up the food chain because you can only get demoted in Ossiarch Bone Reaper's lore. You can't get promoted. Like you only eventually become the hoof of a Cavalos Death Rider's like murder pony. You never go up. It's just the most deliciously cartoonishly evil thing ever, and I love it. And so I'm like,
That-
well, what if there's? Go ahead.
the official X model?
Yeah, this is
You're
the model that inspired the X narrative. I was doing some touch up work,
Oh, I see.
trying to get some highlights on him. So I'm not very good.
Will it become X when you come to an event? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, this is X. This is when this Mortec guard dies. That is X that has died. Like it's the posture. I had like the lean forward. Like the way I modeled it, I gave him 2 skulls on his base instead of just 1, for the texture base.
Do you know that there's a platform for all the narrative players to upload their characters' backstories and interact with each other and use as cameos in their games?
Oh, is there? What is that platform?
Called The Great Weave. Keegan West manages it, and he runs it literally as a game server where you make your character, run your games. You can post up there what happened in the game or put like story hooks, and other people can pick it up or grab your characters to use as cameos and vice versa. So my dream is to kind of like visit all these like settings of narrative events in like a soulbound adventure that just hops all over.
Yeah.
Hasn't
And
happened yet.
if I could hijack your show for just a moment.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
This
Keegan
is
West.
your show tonight, not mine.
Aw, thanks. So Keegan West is an Animosity alumni from. He jumped in 2019, and he's in Thailand. So he actually is what made us a worldwide narrative event, because like Steve Foote did get on board after, but he was the first international person. So I've always appreciated him for that.
There you go.
Because we did have events across the U.S. before that who had signed up, but he was the first out of the States. So regarding your character X, because we talked about him a little bit back in the last time you had me on your show.
I was supposed to join Animosity this year, and I unfortunately won't. It was going to be about X. Now, keep in mind, when you're writing, you write with a premise in mind. X's only premise is that he is going to give it to you. At some indeterminate time, an individual known as X will give it to somebody at some point. Like that's the whole premise of X, and that he go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
And and then he gets leveled up, but he now has an official war scroll because of Anvil of Apotheosis. Like if not to self-honk a little bit, but if anyone wants to go back and see the X war scroll, it's really funny. Something like 40 mortal wounds off the charge. Nothing big, no big deal.
So is X eventually going to give just the food supplies to the Epicurean?
We don't know. We don't know what he is going to get, but at a point in time, like as like a timeline, like as like the timeline on a long enough timeline, the chance of X giving it an unspecified thing to some individual becomes 100%. So.
So
can he deliver multiple its?
I believe so.
And
I think
there's multiple iterations of the things it can deliver.
Yes.
But he does deliver.
Yes. Right.
So I need to
we have tell about the restaurants.
Yeah. So we brought on 2 new writers since last year, which is Leela and Beaveld. His real name's Nick, but he's been Beaveld to me for 10 years, so he's Beaveld. So we brought them on the writing team, and they play off each other really well, and they decided that they wanted in-character roleplay channels. So in Animosity 3, the center of the setting is a city we call Iskarion, and it's an elf capital, but the Iskarneth are not Lumineth. They're pre-Lumineth sort of a splinter culture. So they don't play by all the same rules as normal Lumineth would. And so our writers, Leela and Bevel, they decided like we want to each open a rival food establishment across the street from each other. So Leela's is Five Guys, Nurgle, and Flies, which is run by we don't really know if they actually are Blight Kings, but they're very unhygienic fat men. And across the street is the Epicurean, which is run by a allegedly retired Bone Reaper who is using all the souls in his amalgamation personality to cook all kinds of different soul food.
I love it.
And we have these 2 dueling restaurants. So if you go on our Discord, there's 2 in-character roleplay channels called the Epicurean and Five Guys.
That's fantastic. So like,
And
go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and then like the interesting thing is to see like so which player characters end up eating at which restaurant and interacting with each other.
Well, because
So it's just sort of tongue in cheek fun, but it's interesting.
well, and I think that's some people have this perception that narrative must be this highfalutin, like highbrow, difficult thing that you must be an excellent writer. You have to have majored in English lit. You have to have been writing your whole life, and like that's simply not true. You know, that's why I like to use X as an example. I was making the model. I was just putting it together, and I'm like, huh, like it looks like this guy gonna give it to you. Like X, you know, that rapper, rest in peace, DMX, who's gonna give it to you, and then like this whole silly sub narrative from there, just this that only exists for me, really. You know, that on the table at some point X gonna give it to you. So like, I think it was at Wapaka, the last Wapaka. My Mortek guard wiped out a unit at Night Haunt, and I'm like, the last wound was from X, obviously, because X gave it to them. Like it just. Like I looked down to make sure he was still in the block. Yep, he's there. Okay, so X did the last one. Like, you know, it's just that silly extra thing for yourself. Again, naming, you know, like if you've got a rival or like a friend, like naming a model after a friend, it just goes a long way into like just giving you stakes, giving you investment. That's what narrative is about for me.
And
Path to Glory was written with people like you in mind. I mean, like me as well. Is you have your own narrative and you can take it everywhere you want, and interfere with your games if the other person is a match play player. It's perfect.
so
They've taken the Warcry model and it's perfect.
Well, I don't know if you're gonna hard sell me on Path to Glory here. Let's one step at a time here, guys. um,
no, but Path to Glory is a great way to start the new edition of Age of Sigmar with Animosity campaigns.
So, do you have any like sort of like hanging on thoughts before I kind of go on to my like sort of next question and
yeah, so there was something from chat which was I'm just gonna pronounce it Kicker K7 CKER.
Yeah, Kicker. Yep, that's Kicker.
So I want to say, is that Travis? I'm not sure. Anyway,
Travis,
yeah, that is Travis. I thought so. All right. So he says that he let's see, it's Salandek or Altai for me for who he's gonna fight for. And I just say, why not both?
Ooh. So you're already suggesting some treachery, some double dealing in animosity, and that
I don't know if it'll be double dealing, but we'll see how it shakes out. We have plans. So continue, yeah.
Yeah, so I just kind of want to like I think we got people excited. We've either sold you on this point or not on why you should care about narrative. So what is animosity for people who don't know? They see this lovely little website up. You've talked about, you know, figureheads. We've talked about this narrative. You mentioned something about having a record, but like it's international. Like what is going on here? You know, indoctrinate me. Tell me what animosity is. Yeah.
So Animosity campaign started in 2004 after after Games Workshop's Storm of Chaos Worldwide campaign. So basically on the Orc forum, because internet forums were all the rage before social media, the Orc forum, the Warpath, there were a bunch of Orc players who were like, yeah, we want to do more of this. So they came up with a campaign they called Animosity, which was primarily just a bunch of Orcs crumping each other. And this excuse me, this snowballed, and it just kept going. So from 2004 to 2014 there were about a dozen Warhammer Fantasy Animosity campaigns, which as they grew and grew and grew, ended up exploring corners of the Warhammer world that Games Workshop largely neglected. So the campaigns went to Astalia, they went to Cathay, they went to Ind, they went to Kislev, stuff like that. But anyway, Araby, there were 2 campaigns set in Araby. But regardless, End Times happened, Animosity suffered a site crash at the same time. The old incarnation kind of died. But those of us who had played it, we were like, you know, that this was a huge, you know, I credit Animosity to keeping me in the hobby entirely, through some pretty bad years otherwise. And we were like, well, we want to bring this experience to players who didn't experience it primarily people who've gotten into gotten to Age of Sigmar without having been in Warhammer Fantasy, or they just weren't part of the online community back then. So I pulled together a team of mostly old timers, and we've added some really good newcomers too. So we have a team of 9 people currently. Um, so what Animosity Campaigns is in its current incarnation is we are a 5-week, 5-turn, 5-week narrative event starting July 14th this year, where 6-player teams that we call coalitions, each of them rallied around a non-player character we call figurehead, are fighting for, in this case, each of them, it's very, I don't want to say Game of Thronesy, but they're each seeking to become the Seraph of the Iskarneth Seraphate. And the setting is the Prime Dominion, which is a stable place in Hyzaya, which is the outermost realm of Hysh. So it's this relatively safe, unblemished paradise, in what is otherwise, especially now, the Broken Realms. So whoever's satrap, because we adopted that term from antiquity, whichever Iskarneth satrap ends up becoming Seraph, obviously the supporters who got them there are going to enjoy the benefits of having a friendly face on the throne in this uh, unspoiled paradise. Well, it'll be a little more spoiled after we're done with it. But so that's pretty much what we are. So the core gameplay mechanics is that players can submit what we call submitting reports, and there's 5 different reporting categories. There's gaming, of course. There's hobby. There's writing. There's what we call storytelling, which is the simplest example would be like what they do in all the battle tomes, where you set up a dramatic photograph of 2 armies fighting each other. So if you have 2 armies, and most of us Age of Sigmar players do, just set them up on a board, make some dramatic photographs, and you've done storytelling. And then we have arts and crafts, which is kind of our catch-all category. So I know Nuno is a fan of cosplay. He's always pushing people to do campaign themed
Graphic
cosplays.
that we
But
need to activate. I mean, it's
yeah,
probably active. It's just that we're not as privy to what's going
yeah.
on there. It would
I,
be
But
good to
I
have
I
that
will
conversation.
show up in my necromancer cosplay at an
Yeah.
event in the next year or two. Like
so
this is happening. Like I'm committed to this. So respect to the
well,
cosplayers out there.
so pandemic notwithstanding, we are hoping to have a second animosity event in the year, which we call the Weekender, which will be set sometime in the fall.
Okay.
We have not decided really if that's happening this year. If it doesn't, there will be an online version, which is what we did last time
So
or
you're
last
you're
year.
you're you're looking to set up a physical like in person type thing.
Yeah.
Cool. Right on. I think that's healthy growth.
And we have a fellow out of Las Vegas who's doing a bunch of organizing there. So like we do have local groups, certainly, that Keegan West's group in Thailand. Like we do have physical groups who are playing, but we do want to set up like an actual, in the vein of Holy Wars or Raw or whatever, like a physical, this is the Animosity Weekender sort of event.
Mhm. So
Um
so if I can just go back a little bit to you
yeah.
mentioned like five week 5 round sort of thing. How do I play animosity? Like how do I like because you're over there, I'm over here. How
So
yeah.
you go to animositycampaigns.com, and you read through our landing page and click on new players guide, and that'll give you that's the shortest version I can possibly give, because we did put a lot of thought, especially this year, into how to engage new players. So we have tried to address that in our online presence. But pretty much, if you want to play in Animosity 3, what you do is you go to our website. Right on the homepage, there's a big button that says join our Discord community. And in the new player's guide, if you're not familiar with Discord, we do have sort of learning the ropes of Discord, because I know we have had a few players, and even myself, I didn't really use Discord until I started Animosity. Um, but the campaign itself is run primarily out of the Discord server. So what you'll do is each turn you can submit up to 3 reports, one of each
of the
of
five
yeah,
categories. So like
yeah,
I really pleased with a model I paint, I submit that. I play like a Pathfinder or not a Pathfinder, a Path of Glory game with a friend, I submit that,
yeah.
and so on and
Yeah,
so
the this kind of the trifecta we have in mind is like play a game, write a story, paint a model. Like that'll if you and you don't have to submit 3 reports, but that's our hard cap. But that's like a good
you're a
amount of
gamer and you're
hobby.
competitive, you're gonna try
Yeah.
to
Well, and last year we allowed up to 5 reports, and we had some people really strung out trying to hit that every week, and we were like, nah, let's not do that again.
okay. Okay. So I mean,
Um,
so
yeah, go
even
ahead.
if I live on like an island, and I really don't necessarily have like an active, because I think one of the real truths of Age of Sigmar is we spend so much more time talking about Age of Sigmar and hobbying Age of Sigmar than playing Age of Sigmar. And you have all these people, this big amazing community strung out across the world, and not everyone has like an LGS or let alone a local tournament scene, and they're just looking for ways to engage the game. This sounds like a really good way to do that, even if you kind of live in
Yeah.
a
We had that completely, and it was something we wanted to reach, but I think we were surprised how many people joined in that had never played, probably still haven't played. Some of them did buy models after the fact, and there are many people who like they know the lore and they write some stories or they make a drawing. It's kind of sort of made all engagements that you can have with the hobby equal. All of them count 1 point, 1 vote,
Well,
1 submission for each category.
well,
And it means it doesn't matter how you interact with the hobby.
yeah,
well,
that's
and
kind of
it
special to me, honestly. That's very special, I think. Go on.
it
Go
it
on.
it occurs to me that what I haven't I haven't sealed the deal with is what happens after you submit your reports each turn. So the player turn is 4 days from Wednesday to Saturday, and then the update, the game master turn, where we write what we call the unfolding narrative, runs from Sunday through Tuesday, and it takes us 3 days to pull all that together. So what happens when you submit a report? Each coalition will have 3. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure. So we have 3 narrative paths that are available to your coalition, your player team, and these are generated before each turn by us, the game master team. Like, this is not pre-written at all. We respond to what our players' stories are and use that to develop like what the next set of narrative paths are going to be for the next turn. Um, so where was I going with that? So you allocate your reports to one of these 3 narrative paths, and you can stack your reports all on one path, or you can split them up however you want. But the way we structure that is that each coalition has 3 narrative paths per turn, and if you want a perfect victory, like you really need to win every narrative path every turn. But of course, that's not going to happen because you're in a tug of war with other players on other teams who are opposing you on these different narrative paths. You're on one path you might be fighting. Let's say you're an Idrilic player. You're going to be fighting the Solandek on one. You're going to be fighting the Ruilar on another, and the Orinar on a third. And it becomes sort of a rock paper scissors that you and your teammates need to figure out. What stories really matter to you and how you want to allocate your reports, and what is in keeping with what we want to be really important is like what is important to your character. What are they going to be fighting for more than just the hard crunch of like, well, how can we numerically game this? Like, where when you look at the story, the narrative paths, like what would your character be doing? What would they be fighting for?
Well, it's sounding a little bit like I think how a proper like tabletop RPG, when a real GM is like super engaged,
Yeah.
like the dice and the mechanics just like sort of stress test you on whether your narrative plan pans out or not.
Yeah, and that's very much it. So the result of the reports get fed into pie charts that only we can see, and that kind of decides how well each narrative path goes for you. Is the percentage that you got, percentage more pie chart you have than the other player team. But what we do is we take everybody's narratives and we fold them into what we call the unfolding narrative, and the unfolding narrative is written in real time by us, the game masters. So that's why we brought on 2 more writers this year. So we have 4 writers. So we read all the reports, read and review all the reports that come in, and then we write in real time an unfolding narrative of like what happened over the last turn, and that sets up the narrative paths going into the next turn.
Okay.
So it is absolutely open ended, and it responds to the player's stories in real time. Nothing is railroaded. Nothing is scripted.
So like there are no scripted events. You don't have like a tent pole moment where like, okay, like the players don't know this, but on turn 3 the tower is going to explode. Like nobody, like there's nothing like that. It really is like pure character.
There's a few things, but how they end up, we kind of beforehand we decide like here's some stuff that we want to happen, but then how we write that in is responsive to what the players do and how the narrative paths turned out.
Right on.
I mean, last year we wanted to make sure we were going to do something with the whale god beast, but didn't know exactly how it was going to happen. And when it was kind of finally revealed, we kind of did like a mini video cutscene at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
very last
Who was it telling me their whole goal was to have the Bretonnian charge the whale? Who was
yeah.
that?
That was Sir Kai Leonis. You ascended him from chat gang last time.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, and beforehand, like, because we only had 2 writers that time around, but Peter and I, like, we had this mental image where we wanted the corpse of this dead god beast whale to rise out of the lake, and like that was something that we just knew this was an image we wanted to incorporate at some point, and the players made it really easy when they were like, you know what, we're gonna hashtag drain the lake. So a bunch of Skaven set up a bunch of gnaw holes, and they drained all the water out and exposed the corpse of the whale. And we're like, oh well, we didn't see that coming, but that's convenient.
That I mean, as a
but they
GM,
had to put
that's
reports to it.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Had to put reports, so they suggested the plan, and then we said, if you want that to happen, you're going to need to supercharge the particular narrative path, and they went completely all in.
yeah.
Amazing. See that for me, that's the magic of like tabletop GMing is when you have an idea and your players have a better idea, or they make your idea real, and you're like, yeah, and you're like currently erasing what your plan was and writing in theirs to make the thing happen.
Yeah, a lot of that
The
happens.
players have so many good ideas. We introduced a gigantic dragon ogre Shaggoth of the size of a mountain because it was like a player came up with it, and then it became a plot point.
Yeah, so when Kragnos, like the first Kragnos trailer dropped, and there was like the voiceover.
You were smashing the copyright infringement button like on them.
Yeah, where like it pans away and you see like a clearly Centaur figure, you know, but you can't really see what it is, and he's going on like, I was buried under the mountain, and I'm like, that's our story, we wrote that. So
that just happened in Kragnos. That just happened with a Skaven beat. So like I had my Best Damn Soulbound game, and I had this big Skaven beat, like this rope-a-dope, sort of like 1-2 punch for Anvil Guard. They just did that in Kragnos, and I'm like, I'm a fucking genius. Like, like it just like someone told me like, hey, have you read Kragnos yet? They totally had your story beat with the Skaven. I'm like, what? And that was like a barely shared beat. You guys had like an icon, like a literal icon, sort of like moment.
yeah, and I mean, of course, Kragnos turned out to be something completely different, but like just for that trailer, I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So
that's pretty special. That's pretty awesome.
But yeah, that was 100%. You know, especially Drain the Lake, but there were a few other things that were absolutely player ideas, and like what happened after the giant dragon ogre Shaggoth was being used as a trump card against the coalition we called the Expedition, and like basically the narrative path for the Expedition that turn was like, you have a giant dragon ogre Shaggoth, you know, you see it on the horizon and it's getting bigger, deal with it. You know, and basically leaving it to players to figure out what they were gonna do.
So can certain
They
narrative
have a storm vault that they could access.
They had a storm vault. Cool.
They had also say what you're finding in the storm vault, come up with something interesting, and then make that into a submission, and they did.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you find that like narrative balls kind of like sort of push down the hill earlier on can like sort of have gains down the line to where like the narrative threshold that they've put almost can be a little bit more weightful than like the reports necessarily? Do you find there's something like that sort of happens like?
Well, yes, but actually no, because at the end of the day, we do want it to be mechanics grounded. So
Okay.
it really does
Okay.
come back to that rock paper scissors of how reports are allocated. Like,
Okay.
so like when it comes to gaming, like the thing we say is a report is a report is a report. So like it doesn't matter if you won or lost the game. Like you play the game, that's the important part.
Uh-huh.
But we do want it to come back to the crunch of our game engine and those mechanics of submitting reports,
Hmm.
and the percentage of how many reports you allocate versus how many reports your opponent's allocated, and what that differential is. That determines how successful things are or not. So it's like one of the things that happened in Animosity 2.
Pardon me. Can you riff for a moment? I do need to step away.
Yeah,
Okay. This is
yeah, fair,
you're playing the chat gang drinking game that is not official and will totally kill you. There's your
fair
moment,
enough.
everyone. Finish your beer.
Uh,
Uh, I'm gonna tap into
You're the
chat
host
here.
and Nuno's the guest now. So.
Yeah, fair enough. So there. I'm just gonna tell war stories. So there was everyone knows when Torag Tometer blew up the diplomacy boat, but like I mentioned in the Discord earlier, like no one really remembers when he didn't blow up Satreya like a turn or two earlier, because he certainly tried. But again, that was just how the report allocation and the pie charts worked out. Was that when the pilgrimage blew up the boat, a bunch of pilgrimage players put a ton of reports into that path, and the expedition put very few into it. Uh, the fight over Satreya, when the pilgrimage and expedition were both trying to claim it, um, the pie chart ended up much more closely matched. So I think like the expedition still had a real fight on their hands, but they had the edge. They were able to push out the pilgrimage, and looking at the different I want to say that there was something in particular where through the diplomacy channels, one of the expedition players had actually gotten some scouts from the perpetual, where the perpetual were like, well, we'll help you out in Satreya if you do this other thing. So the perpetual actually, I believe, allocated. I'm trying to remember. I think they actually allocated a couple of reports to Satreya in support of the expedition, and these were supposed to be like forward sneaky scouts that were very hard to detect, and that kind of set up like, well, Torag's over here trying to blow up the city, but these scouts see him do that, and then the expedition players know that the city's been mined, and they can go in and intercept what Torag was doing, and those bombs never went off and the city didn't explode. uh but it really
the
came
thing
back
is,
to, yeah,
it's the story that he wrote, that my characters are setting up the bombs in the city of Satreya, that still made it into the story, and
mhm.
they were defeated in the story. So essentially, everything gets folded into the main narrative. And it's all player created.
Yeah. And so yeah, all those plots, it's not like, as you're saying, it's not like what Torag did or what Torag attempted in his reports didn't happen. It very much did happen, but the pie chart was not in his favor.
Thwarted.
Yeah, was not in the pilgrimage's favor, so the bombs didn't go off. So we do try to balance story with that mechanical crunch.
And
And
I
that
think that
that's
was the first
yeah, go ahead.
that was the first turn, I think, that we saw the first player collaborative writing, where two other coalitions, they shared their scouts, and
Yeah,
they together wrote each other's characters into their writing reports, and even into their gaming reports, I think. Put
that
like
could be it.
a few death models fighting alongside them, I think.
So I'm gonna quote uh Cosgrove, one of our GMs in chat. He says, "We don't release numbers or how we do it because we don't want people to meta game the numbers. So please don't ask how exactly we do it. Just know that we do some math stuff and it turns into other math stuffs, and it turns into our narrative. And yeah, that was a very conscious decision. Previous the Warhammer Fantasy incarnation of Animosity was much more open with the mechanics, and it invariably just created fights. And I mean, you don't need to look further. Sorry, my cat's playing with a toy in the background. You don't need to look further than the furor over, what third edition means for people's Gloomspite gets armies, to know that, when you start bringing crunch into it, people get angry. So, um,
That's true. It's easy. It's more easy if it's run as a role play game.
yeah,
And I think, yeah, and I mean that doesn't stop people from getting competitive in
Yeah,
the coalition. It
it's
didn't last year.
no, and to kind of go back to where we were at the top, like it's super important to me that animosity is actually a competitive experience. Um, but at the same time, we want players to be focused on the story and not on the mechanical crunch that makes it all work. Um, and again, it's funny because in our GM chats, Cosgrove mentioned, he would be one of the people trying to game the numbers and figure out like, well, we need to allocate X, X reports here, X reports there, and that ends up superseding the story. And that's exactly what we saw. Even though he wasn't a player back in the Warhammer Fantasy version, he's one of our newcomers. That was exactly what would happen back then, where we would have players in each coalition, each player team, who would try to figure out like, well, we need this number of reports here, this number of reports here, and then it was up to the players like, well, your narrative's nice, but this is what we need to make it work. And that's not what we wanted in this incarnation. Like, we want player stories to be first and foremost, and we try to represent that with the unfolding narrative, that highlights what everyone has done each turn. So Nuno, my
No,
voice is burning out a little bit, so I'm going to kick it over to you for a sec.
right. What else can we say? I think the collection of submissions from players, I feel, to me, this is the thing that I find the thing that is most beautiful about Animosity, other than the feeling of the gameplay itself, is that by the time you write the unfolding narrative, we actually have images of the characters, the painted models that represent the characters in the story. We actually have images of them. And we have images of the battlefields that players used, of little vignettes that are each of the battles that are happening that contribute to a narrative path. And artwork. We have artwork of specific characters that players have in their army or their role playing in Soulbound. Oh yeah, so this is fully compatible with Soulbound as well. So you can run a Soulbound game, and the mission contributes somehow to a narrative path. Everything is integrated. Everything's allowed.
Yeah, yeah,
All is permissible, yeah.
yeah. So I'm glad you were able to read chat there, so I could keep contributing there. It was kid bedtime. I could hear her off camera having some issues.
No, we have a plurality of dads on the team, so
Yeah, right on. Yeah. So it sounds like you're very. I liked what you said about like sort of the player's narrative first, and that's why you hide the like sort of hide the numbers.
yeah,
Um,
the crunch.
yeah, hide the crunch. You get it. Um, yeah, I'll just switch to like full on dad hammer mode eventually.
It's the same reason why a DM would roll behind the screen, I feel.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
that's
trying to
a good way.
preserve
Yeah,
priority is the player experience
Yes.
first and foremost. You want to be fair, but the priority is the player experience.
Right. Right. I mean, stories are, especially in like RPGs and tabletop RPGs. I don't know why every time we talk about animosity, I tend to have like RPGs on the brain,
I,
more than
It
even
makes sense.
Warhammer. But
it's yeah, it makes sense to me.
but when you're GMing, like again, it goes back to that like Balbosa quote, right? Like the rules are guidelines and not actual. And if you get too buried in the rules minutia, you're not necessarily paying attention to the right part of the experience, that collective storytelling experience. And like,
That's what AOS actually has started to do to me, because as the rules have become more complex, it starts detract to me at least. It starts detracting from the experience of playing the game.
hmm,
Yeah.
As more gotcha, the famous gotcha moments of the rule that you didn't know, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, I think I'm very excited about 3.0. Like I said at the onset, like all the voices in my head come together to like sort of have a ball. Like this is the ultimate playground for me. Like yeah, I rank RPGs on the higher rung, but I don't know necessarily what that even means when I say it that way. I did our tabletop RPGs first. They're the thing I obsess over harder. I don't know, no, because I obsess over AOS. I have an AOS show, not an RPG show. Like I don't even know what that means. But like I'm very cognizant of like how RPGs have shaped my experience. Like I've always said that in like RPGs are the thing. If I had infinite time and infinite friends at all times, I'd probably be playing RPGs first. If I only have one friend around, I want to play Age of Sigmar, and if I'm by myself, I want to play video games. Like, and just kind of like, and that's what I mean, I guess, with my like hierarchy or my rung. But like, getting a lot of people to commit to like a big story thing, like, how much do you find the time sink to be for something like this for like a player? If I join Animosity, how much time am I putting into this a week? You mentioned like 4 days, and so like the sort of time frame. But how much time am I personally putting in? Does it vary?
So
I'm sure it varies player to player. But
so
I have a hot take, but go ahead first.
I was gonna say, so I'm gonna give the like the bare bones answer. So to play in Animosity, we did make registering the Discord mandatory this year, but how active you are in the Discord is your choice. The bare minimum is that you should really read through our websites to the setting, the figureheads, coalitions, unfolding narrative, that sort of thing. Obviously, the time to come up with whatever reports you're going to do. So hopefully, it's stuff you're already doing. So playing games, painting models, that sort of thing. Taking pretty pictures of them.
Okay.
And so finally, I lost track of my own thought here.
Time.
So
The time sink. Yeah.
yeah, the time sink is so you do whatever you're going to submit for a report, and then you go on the website. So when you submit a report, it's just a Google form. So it literally only takes a few moments to fill out the Google form. We have it all set up for you. With mostly drop-down menus. So you just pick, I'm fighting for this coalition. You type in your character's name. You pick which path you're reporting to, and that's pretty much it. So if you want to participate, like you read our background stuff.
I'm
you
sorry.
register for.
I'm sorry. I'm not joining one of the coalitions. Everything I do is going to serve Mithridates here.
Mithridates Altai. Well,
Yeah. Sorry.
you
Already going off script because that's the type of gamer I am. Sorry. Figureheads and coalitions. I'm like, oh, there's all these. Oh, someone's unaligned. Nice. Let's go.
well,
Oh, you don't know who he is. He's a vampire myth.
Yeah.
And then I clicked on it and it confirmed my suspicions. I'm like, yep. Sorry, everybody.
He's a vampire.
So to finish answering your question, then I want to go to Nuno's hot take, and then I'll come back to to the Mithridates Altai thing. So basically, again, you read our background info, you pick what team you want to fight for, you sign up on the Discord, you do hobby, and you submit the reports, and like that is 100% of what you need to do to have an impact. Because like we're gonna try to work you into the story, but because everything does come back to that sort of mechanical crunch, like when you submit reports to a narrative path, you are helping your team. You don't, if you want to be active in the Discord and talk strategy and collaborate with your teammates, like you can do that. It's there to do, and we ask that you sign up on our Discord so that we have the numbers of like, hey, here's how many players we have, here's who they are. We can contact them directly.
Do you get a nice little like so like depending on what coalition, do you get like a nice little like sub forum where
Yes.
only you're allowed in, so you
Yes,
can discuss strategy and stuff with play?
Yep.
Okay. That's one of
It's
the
a
strengths
very
of
important
Discord.
part. Yeah.
That's a very very good advantage to Discord is like sort of these, I only have like my Patreon chat as like sort of our admin and Patreon chat walled off, but you can assign chats to roles, which is a really nice feature of Discord. So I think that
yeah, and we do have a robust role system, so we can ping everyone in a coalition. We can ping everyone from whichever campaigns they played in. Like we have that. So back in the day when we were forum based, each coalition would get their own private sub forum. We're not forum based anymore, but we are Discord based. So it's basically the same thing where you get a channel that you can't post in, but it's all like your need to know. So like what your narrative paths are that turn, what bonuses are in play, that sort of thing. So you have a quick reference right there. And then you have other channels where you can talk strategy, you can collaborate your story, that sort of thing. And you have a private voice channel as well if you want to hang out with just other people in your coalition.
That's rad. That's rad. So is
So
it hot take time? Is it hot take time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hot take time.
I mean, I don't know if it's exactly hot take, but after our very carefully curated, survey of players, we talked about a time sink. It will suck you in, you'll get addicted, and it'll ruin every schedule you may have for 5 weeks. That's what we witnessed in Discord.
I love that,
And
like,
was sucked in,
go ahead.
typing away strategy. I was like, oh, let's do this. no, let's do that, and like convoluted plans that would like fall down, resurrect, and the idea would be recycled.
Well,
Yeah, people were sucked in bad. It's
the, the
amazing. It's
the worst
amazing.
part, one of the things I enjoyed least about the old fantasy campaigns on the forums was diplomacy, where the coalitions would try to engage in diplomatic wrangling with each other. As a player, I hated it. I did not design it into Animosity 2 at all. I'm like, just fight, just crump each other, please. And the players are like, no, we're gonna talk it out.
Yeah.
Oh my
Um,
God, they tried to Care Bear their way out of, at least a few coalition tried to Care Bear their way out of the narrative paths almost all the
and
time.
yeah, it definitely caught us off guard. So
That's
in
funny.
large part thanks to Cosgrove in the chat, we will have a more robust diplomatics mechanics like built in this time. But yeah, that was one of those things where like players would just obsess at length over like, well, this is the message we got from that team. Like, what are we going to respond with? What do we really want to give them that? Like, just ad infinitum. So yeah, that you can definitely. Uh, this is again why I say narrative and especially animosity campaigns is more competitive in my opinion. And Cosgrove might have a hot take in chat, but to me, it's more competitive than like we had a bunch of local players go to the Atlantic City Open this past weekend, and like
Shout outs to Martin
so
Orlando for running that.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean it looked like a great tournament and all, but like listening to them on my local group Discord, and they're getting back, and it's like 5 games and I'm beat and I'm so tired. It's like cool. So do that for 5 weeks
Mhm.
and just have your
I
soul ripped
I
out.
I love I just want to take a moment to like lean back here and like just appreciate the fire coming out of the narrative players right now and like throwing down the gauntlet and being like we're more competitive than you, and you're turning who's more competitive as into a competition to entice people to come try out your stuff. I respect. Game knows game, and I respect it.
Biggest global narrative AOS event ever, man.
So I actually I have I don't know where you want to take the conversation next, but I do have a challenge for you when you're ready for it.
Oh, okay, well, I mean, we can do the challenge first. I've got a few questions here written down that tie back into a couple things and go off in different
Okay.
directions. But if you got a challenge, I see as a GM, I believe if you have a good idea, use it immediately. GMs often
Fair enough.
like get into this trap of like, man, I've got this great plan for this dragon to show up, and then like by the time your players get to that point in your where you plan on doing the thing, it's so far off of the mark of where that was relevant.
Yeah.
Use your good idea. So use your challenge now.
All right. So I got the impression you had the figureheads and coalitions page up anyway, because you
I
said you looked at the
Yeah,
Mithridates also.
like my contrarian, like I saw player teams. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I started like I went to click on one of them, and then I scrolled down. And I saw unaligned NPCs, and the contrarian in me, the like, row fight the power, like kicked in immediately.
I like that
And
song.
I'm like, oh, this guy must be awesome because he's unaligned and an NPC. So screw these coalitions. I want to go help that guy. And then I clicked on him, and I'm like, oh, vampire dude. Hell yeah, I chose correctly.
So just some context there. Mithridates Altai is actually a returning figurehead from Animosity 1. So we only had about 40 players back then, but for those who were around then, like it's a name that's been in our mythos for a little bit. But basically, so our lore is that Mithridates Altai was secretly the founder of the Iskarneth Seraphate. So all these other elves owe their current civilization to him, and he has come back and he wants the throne for himself. So you have each player coalition. They want their satrap to be the next seraph, and then you have this vampire dude being like, "Well, technically, you guys owe me everything, and I think I would be a better king than any of you. Put me on the
I
throne."
mean, I agree. So, like,
But
I
but
know
you
nothing else.
so
I agree.
well so that would give you
Such a
an
mark.
interesting that would give you an interesting thing to bring up in the in whatever coalition you join, because then you could try to leverage your other players like, hey, we should convince our satrap to support Mithridates Altai. So that's kind of how that works, is that you would be trying to, and there another thing is that you can actually not really role play, but you can speak with your figurehead in the private. There will be another channel just for like where you guys as players can appeal to your figurehead and try to sway their opinion on stuff. So you would be trying to get them like, hey, we should be supporting Mithridates Altai. And that our hope is that depending on how things go, that might become an appealing option for players to be like, well, it doesn't look like we're going to win this war, but hey, if we back Mithridates, maybe we'll have another shot at winning this, but we'll be supporting his bid rather than our satrap's bid.
You
But
don't
regardless,
want me in that. The agent of chaos I will become. You don't want me in that.
no, I do want you in it. I'm sad you're not playing, but I understand why. So my question
too
is,
much time, man. I can't. The 5 weeks that I would totally get sucked into this, and I would be up in bed.
I
Like,
understand.
on my phone,
I understand.
Like,
I believe me, I absolutely get it. But so my challenge to you that I just personally want
that means chat gang, you need to go play on my behalf. Like, you have to rep me. Like, you got to do it for me, everybody. So your challenge to me.
Do it, chat gang. Do it.
So on the figureheads and coalition page, each coalition has just a paragraph intro, and they do have much more narrative below that, but each one has just a paragraph intro. So I want to know which of these 6 that X would fight for.
Ooh, okay.
So do you want me to read through them and like do a dramatic reading?
Yeah. Why don't you do it that way? Yeah. Like, are you and Nuno switch off and do a dramatic reading? I think that'd be pretty compelling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to start, Nuno, or you want me to start?
You can start.
Just the paragraph. Paragraph is a good first impression.
All right. So I'm just going to go down the list. So I'm going to start with the Idrelek. Led by a Tressa Red Hand, the Idrelek are the most warlike of all the satrapies. A harsh meritocracy where only skill secures advancement, they trace their heritage to the Tyrionic hemisphere of Hish. The Idrelek believe they live or die by their strength at arms, and will never back down from a fight or a slight. So that's the Idrelek in a nutshell.
I'm a man of finesse and schemes.
And just to plug our team real quick. So as you poke around the site, you'll notice some art assets which are all original. So the sigils for each coalition is original,
especially with Hish in there. Like this is a really good attention to detail.
My dad actually did the illustrations for each of the satraps. Kurgan has done all the maps and location art, stuff like that. So we do have a lot of original assets that we've created just for this campaign. Nice. The Techlandic.
They have very like ukiyo-e sort of like almost like Japanese calligraphy quality to them.
That was the intent. Yep.
Love it.
I mean, Saul's artwork and your dad's has just added a lot of cool stuff. All right, so the Techlandic. Led by Dariel the Resplendent, the Techlandic are the most prosperous of all the satrapies. They rule the breadbasket of the Prime Dominion and want for nothing, except perhaps more. The Techlandic's seemingly endless resources have made them a powerful trading partner throughout Haish and beyond. And the figurehead is, it's Dariel the Resplendent.
Yep.
He's amazing at everything he does, supposedly, right? That's his shtick.
Yes, he's supposed to be like the pinnacle of elf society. So some people like that. A lot of people hate it.
This art takes me straight back to like the RPGs I was cutting my teeth on in like the 80s and 90s. Like straight back to that stuff. Like the old school like pencil drawing sketches you'd have from like Kevin Sambedia in Palladium Fantasy RPG or Gary Gygax, like some of the stuff from original D&D, like just that.
And it's funny you mention that because my dad, he's 76 this year, so he is a classically trained illustrator, so that would have been the era that he was learning to draw in.
It's fantastic. So. There's a Hey GM Kenny occasionally in chat gang. He's a tattoo artist, and he has a like this style that's like lifted straight from like the Tolkien and like it's like Tolkien meets heavy metal. Like if you remember the heavy metal, like the actual like heavy metal magazine, like it's like those two things combined. I'm like, I think there's just art with personality is just, and this sort of stuff gives something personality. When I can look at this and accidentally pick out a time, like a time frame with the and just it throws me immediately into like my nostalgia pleasure centers. That said,
do you know what these green books are? Do you know what these green books here in the corner are?
What are that?
These are fighting fantasy books. The Choose Your Own Adventure books, collected in like old book fairs. They're gathering dust.
Amazing.
So I just before I read the Salandek, I need to just reply to chat gang here. So
See, boo
Cosgrove
elf.
says, "Boo elf, boo," and Lex says, "Let's show him how good he is at getting his ass kicked."
I love the shots. I love the
So,
the viscera already forming. Like,
This is Animosity Discord 5 weeks. That's
yeah, yeah, but
At this time
our
we
name is
actually
well
have a
chosen.
number of newspaper templates that they can use to essentially smear each other with propaganda.
Fantastic. I love it.
So the Salandek, to get back to the challenge, so it sounds like X wouldn't be too hot to trot for the last two, but we still got 4 to go. So
The first one, I like X himself. I could see maybe thinking like excellence of execution, like warrior way through. Like I could maybe see it. For the second one, there's a part of me that enjoys a good pompous elf, actually, but
yeah, this is X's story. So
yeah.
all right, so the Salandek, led by Renaya Oathsworn, the Salandek are the most embittered of all the satrapies.
Speaking my language.
A hard
Embittered.
people well acquainted with even worse hardship. They are formed from the broken dregs of Lumineth society, cast adrift by the Spirefall. Looked down upon by the other satrapies, they shelter unwanted refugees from across the realms, and plan for the day they will take back what should be rightfully theirs. So that's the Salandek.
Strong.
There's a controversy regarding their leader, right?
Yeah, so part of why they're embittered is I'll just read it. So the most recent humiliation came as a result of the Usurpers' War, a little more than a century ago, when the Idrelek, Teklandek, and Ruyalar marched against the Slandic and wrested away more than half their lands. Fought on the pretext that the Slandic satrap had secretly been replaced, it was little more than an excuse to strip yet more away from the already poor Slandic. So yeah, basically there's this salacious rumor that Renaya Oathsworn is dead. Like it's what the thing with Paul McCartney. So like Renaya is dead, and
Yeah. Like the Sergeant Pepper's the Sergeant Pepper's conspiracy, right?
Yeah, there's an imposter who has taken her identity, and that all the other satraps use that as an excuse to deny the Slandic legitimacy.
Well, I was already leaning towards this one so far just because the Rao fight the power vibes were starting to come at me, and I like that. And X's whole shtick is that he remembers distinctly one of his souls, and he needs to keep it secret from like the Mortisans around him, because if they find out, so he's in the liege sort of caste, right? The warrior caste. Yeah. If they find out he remembers who he is, even though he's this brilliant field tactician, they'll blend him again, and he'll lose his identity. Yeah. And so there's his actually main enemy is within his own army. It's the supporting Mortison character. Like, because I haven't thought about it yet, we've named them Y. But so like the main rival is, and it's probably gonna be like a play on Yggdrasil or something like that. Like just to, it's gonna start with a Y, but it'll be a full name instead of just X versus Y.
So if you're
W and a Z.
Yeah.
If you were playing, which I understand you're not, and I'm not trying to bully you into it, but you might find a plot hook.
I see Mortison Soulmason right here, like just right under here, because I scrolled down, and I'm like, you already kind of had me at like the underdogs trying to take back their power sort of plot line.
So the idea is that so every satrap has an equerry. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And so basically they're a secondary figurehead that acts. They act one as a go-between between the satrap and the players, and they're also supposed to be kind of an example of like how you could write a player army into supporting, so that they're supposed to sort of set the pace for like, projecting how player armies can.
Yeah, why would OBR be helping out some elves and shit, right? Like,
yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, his very, and I've actually, he's supposed to be from Cosgrove's army. But anyway, Akrodregos, he's basically like, oh, these people are down on their luck, which means I'll ally with them, and they'll give me their enemies.
Here's,
to collect their bones
I've
from.
drafted this nice little contract for you.
Yeah, just we won't take your bones, but we'll take everyone else's bones if you let us.
Yeah, I mean,
with your
I'll be
blessing.
right back. You keep doing the reading.
Yeah,
this is in the lead so far, and that was before I even
okay,
saw the Soul Mason thing, which feels like it's kind of
fair enough. But at the same time, like it could be an interesting plot for you. Like maybe it's Acrodregos who's looking at X, like, you something doesn't seem quite right about you.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Like,
but
and that's
anyway,
the whole thing. Is so X has like the 12 souls that make him a sweet liege or whatever.
yeah,
But he's, like, oh shit, like I don't want to get reblended, so he has to play the cold person as he's, the cold martial person and mask that he's remembered his like a distinct life amid these like 12 voices in his head or their
yeah.
head really. Um, so the Ruular.
Yep, Ruular. Led by Caradhras Lightbringer, the Ruular are the most cultured of all the satrapies. Home to the youngest, brightest minds in the Prime Dominion, they have rejected the old ways of Lumineth society in favor of forging a new and innovative path.
Okay, I like that.
The Ruular draw fresh ruling and philosophical ideologies from other cultures, making them a rising power to be reckoned with.
Okay. We're getting so that there was a part there where I'm like, but I'm like, oh, like they like science and progress, legit.
Yeah, so basically they because every satrapy was born from the Spirefall, where like old Lumineth society choked on its pride. Hubris was the downfall of the Lumineth before so basically the Roylar's whole shtick is like Teclis came to Lumineth society with his reinvention. We're like we're gonna be yin and yang with the land spirits, and we're gonna humble ourselves and all that. And these Lumineth, the Iskarneth, they don't really believe in that. But the Caradhras and the Real are like, well, we still need to progress, and the old ways didn't work clearly, so we're not going to do what Teclis is doing, but we're not going to stick to the old ways either because they didn't work.
Right.
And like, we have a very strict no politics rule on our Discord, but as someone who considers themselves fairly progressive in my politics, like that, to me that's an interesting thing of let's take elves who are known for being so ancient, and let's what happens when they decide, like, we're going to throw out all our old stuff and figure out something new.
Well, no, I think there's a difference between talking like partisan politics and talking politics in general. I think is a really, I think as a one of the problems culturally speaking that we have, and this is my soapbox for a moment here, is that we don't talk about politics in a productive, meaningful manner. We talk partisan team politic crap, not like complex sort of individual versus individual and like what we think and feel, because most people aren't bad just because they're on a different team than you, okay?
Yeah,
politically speaking. And what's interesting, politics is just power. Essentially, it's just the arrangement of power. That is the most simplified, while still being an academic definition we have for politics. Elves pose a really interesting sort of like allegory for politics over time. There's sort of a rubber band of, like, yeah, we switch from feudalism to like more capitalism, and then the power structures within all that sort of rubber band back and forth between going progressive essentially and then snapping back to authoritarian, and then going progressive and then snapping back to authoritarian. The Greeks, for instance, whom our current democracy is essentially built upon, sort of pre-feudalism, and we went back in time to like pluck this sort of Greek like representative democracy essentially out of the ancient times. And the elves have always had a strong allegory of being Greek or Greco-Roman, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, but Greek civilization did fall, and that poses a really interesting question for democracy. There's probably, and I think, and this is me personal soapbox moment, there's probably some really great bones there for something that worked pretty decently for an ancient society, works pretty decently for a modern society, but I don't think we're quite there yet with what in totality we should be practicing that is equitable and good for the most possible humans in our current society, which makes the Ruular probably the most Mephisto specifically of the factions. But I have to think about X.
So yeah, because X gonna give it to you.
Correct.
So something I don't have been watching the because we published this about 4 weeks ago, and watching our Discord and everything. I don't know if players fully appreciate it. So like, whoever becomes Seraph, like their vision for how things should be done is going to shape the Prime Dominion and the Iskarnate Seraphate, in Animosity lore going forward. So if it's Caradhras who ends up on the throne and the R'hllor as the ruling party, it will be a very progressive, forward-thinking sort of place. And that might not happen if say the Techlandic get it, and they're very that they're almost a complete opposite, in that they're very traditional in their approach to being elves. So Nuno, do you want to take the Dorniar?
Hmm. So the Dorniar, led by Lucidrod the Deathly, the Dorniar are the most learned of the satrapies. Thinkers and philosophers all, they're devoted to studying history and scrying the past for prophecy. Although slow to anger, once they've been roused to wrath, the Dorniar descend upon their foes with all the crushing finality of an avalanche.
Metal.
And the thing to say is that their leader is sitting, let me see if I get the words right. He is sitting on an ancient artifact throne that gives him enhanced omniscience.
Yeah, so
Like,
Hamgalad, the Throne of Light, is one of the few artifacts in the Prime Dominion dating from before the Spirefall. It is literally carved from a beam of Hish's radiance by arts none still possess, and fewer still can claim to understand. It was crafted in the last mad rush of lofty creation that presaged the realm's descent into madness, and borne to the Dominion on the backs of refugees, a final monument to their former glory. For the past 5 centuries, it has served as a Lucidrod's seat of power, and the place from which he rules and from which he rarely stirs.
so there's.
I want to say this bit.
Go
I
ahead.
want to say this bit here. Like, he can see through the eyes, and there are many of his trusted agents, the Watchers.
Yeah, so
There's
so he,
kind of a dagger element there as well.
uh yeah, so if you've ever watched the 2020 movie Tenet, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, the Nolan film.
I haven't seen it.
Uh
I'm familiar with it. I haven't seen it.
so basically the core plot point there is that uh you can move forward or backward through time, like you're not tethered in time. And that's kind of the shtick with the Watchers, where we're like I literally watched Tenet and I'm like, oh, wouldn't elves be horrifying if they weren't completely anchored in time?
That's a
So
great,
his
thought
his
experiment.
whole shtick is that, so the Dornier proper army, like all the other satrapies do, but they do have the Watchers, which are these weird elf agents that uh their satrap can see through all their eyes all the time. So it creates this sort of weird. A big inspiration for the Dornier was actually the Delak from Necromunda. So that they're the sneaky, stabby, shadow sort of satrapy.
I dig it. I dig it.
But they're definitely metal, as much as anyone else.
No, I mean this is really cool. I like the I mean you kind of had me at thinkers and philosophers, and I'm like, yeah.
Well,
Philosophy.
because
Go ahead.
yeah, because like we can't, obviously we can't do actual like reading the future, because we can't do that in a story that's happening in real time. But
Right.
what we can do is the quote that stood out to me was, those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. So again, every satrap and every satrapy has been scarred by the Spirefall. So their way of dealing with that is like, well, if we know the past, we can shape the future. So they're very obsessed with studying as much history as they can get their hands
Also,
on, to try to be able to predict what everything, where things are going to fall in the future.
see, my Vampire the Masquerade character that I've been playing, that game stopped, but I've been
Yeah.
playing a Banu Hakim, who's, I know it's a cliche that they're ninja assassins with katanas, but like I've been playing this sort of like, I joked and called his character concept Batman Who Hakim. So like he's basically like, he's kind of like a Batman type, obsessed with justice but completely twisted code of honor. Like has law is clinging to this code of honor to like this code from the past to like try to cling to his humanity as he sort of hunts monsters and loses himself more and more and more in the world of darkness where all the nightmares are real, right? Like how do you cling to that? And so like he has this literal scroll of tenets passed down from like the sort of assassins that like he's distilled from, right? Like um and like yeah, he totally uses a katana because katanas are cool, though it would probably be more accurately like a different sword. But I can't help it. Like I model katanas onto skeletons. It's a disease.
X gonna give it to you.
Like X gonna give it to you. Yeah, I looked at these swords and I'm like, I don't think I want to give them katanas. They're close enough. Like,
All right, so Nuno, we're pretty much at the end here. So but both of the satrapies and the player teams and the our 2 hour allotment here. But so the Orinar, do you want to do the Orinar or you want me to?
Sure, I can do it.
All right.
So the Ornar are led by Aiden the Auric. The Ornar are rumored to be the wealthiest of all the satrapies, boasting coffers twice as deep as any two of their rivals. However, no one has seen this incredible wealth, with the people of the satrapy living a strictly frugal life, frugal existence. Having lost everything in the Spirefall, they have amassed material goods for the inevitable day the apocalypse revisits them. So they're the preppers.
they're doomsday preppers, yeah.
Yeah.
Doomsday
I
preppers.
love it.
They are the hoarders of
Well. So
the
I feel like
of the
that's.
Great Depression.
I was gonna say I feel like that's kind of disparaging in that like a part of the core concept was the Great Depression era generation where like they know what hardship is and they don't want that to ever repeat.
Actually, if, doomsday prepper gets like kind of like it's a very sensationalized term. I don't want to like disparage anyone who's like bow of the fifth column has like a very responsible take on sort of like being mindful of your commodities and stuff and anticipating like even like quarantine, like okay, you probably need pallets of toilet paper, but like what about rationing and these other important concepts that we should keep in mind. So like I say it not disparagingly when I mention Doomsday Prepper. I know we all have like a Ted Nugent style like stereotype that comes
Yeah.
to our mind. That's not what I was going after, mind you. I just want to be clear about that.
These folks lived through the Doomsday.
Right.
Yeah, so they're
That's the thing.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And they brought all the goods with them. That's, I think, to me, it's one of the things that I find the coolest because their vaults are full of interesting stuff.
well, and they've been amassing more of it, but like the description we wrote for them starts with waste not, want not is at the heart of Orinar philosophy. There's a society marked by thrift and backbreaking toil, sacrificing and saving out of ancestral fear of cataclysm, in the hope that the fruits of their labor may prove enough to save them when the time comes. For this reason, though they are wealthy, the Orinar live the barest lives of all the satrapies. Better one loaf of bread today and one tomorrow, they reason, than 2 loaves today, and tomorrow none at all. So the idea is that basically they feel the campaign that starts on the 14th, like this is they're kind of the pitch to attract players with them is that they have this sort of two-step thing where like they feel they're prepared for this war, maybe not everyone else is, but more than that, if Aiden becomes the Seraph and the Orinar rule the Prime Dominion and the Seraphate, the events of Broken Realms have proved like their style leadership is going to be needed for whatever comes after, and that's also very interesting in that our campaigns take place along a timeline. So there's going to be future campaigns, and what happens here in the Prime Dominion will play into what happens in those campaigns.
Well, that actually
So-
covers one of my questions I had was do the animosities like one as players returning, not necessarily like a boon, but is there some sort of like returning like investment for returning players that doesn't necessarily offset new players, right? Getting interested.
Yeah.
And do my actions as a player in Animosity impact later animosities?
Yeah,
So
it does. So
that's it. All goes back to stakes, right? Stakes and investment. Yeah.
so part of why we ended up writing Mithridates Altai, and if you want, I'll get into him real quick too. Is so he was a figurehead for a coalition in Animosity 1, and he lost pretty badly. So, because he lost in that campaign, he shows up, 2 campaigns later and becomes a major player here. But that's what's the term I'm trying to think of? Like that strand of fate would have been different.
Meta plot, right? Oh, okay, strand of
Yeah,
fate.
yeah, because his storyline would have wound up differently if his coalition had performed better, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Um,
And you might not even have
he got
thought to
imprisoned,
use him
right?
in this plot, right? If his plot had panned out a
Yeah.
certain way, it wouldn't even
yeah.
But
So
already last year, he became a plot point because his coalition lost. He was imprisoned, and one of the missions of one of the coalitions last year was literally to break him out.
Huh. That's
So
fantastic.
so now
that
people that are returning this year already know this guy, but they might have been aware of his full story, and now we kind of sort of recapped it.
That's pretty awesome.
well that was the best part. So the expedition and the perpetual for 4 turns we tried to get them to fight, and they always talked it out. So on the 5th turn we're like, hey, here's a diplomatic narrative path. Like just chalk it out, figure it out. And it was basically the perpetual were like, well,
Correct.
you're holding this dude who's important to us captive. Like we need to work something out so we can get him back. And that dude was Mithridates Altai. And that was branching out of what had happened at the end of Animosity 1. And so we were just, diplomatic, talk it out, whatever. That drew blood. I'm like, all right, cool.
Well, that's the thing is when you lean into what the players want, that's when they subvert you. It's every time. This is a rule of jamming. Like the number of big bad evil guys I have created, where the party just decided to talk to the big bad evil guy instead, and like now they have a friendo who's like a beholder librarian, and I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, cool. Like, yeah, like lawful evil, and I'm like, well, lawful, and like it's got an IQ of 20, so like you can reason with it, like. And then they're like, hey, like, we don't want to, like, loot your library. It's just going to be destroyed. So, like, how about you help us, like, extricate it from here? And, like, dude, you could totally be in control of it on our airship. And, like, so now you have a beholder in control of your library on your airship.
Right.
Fine. Like, roll some dice because you got to talk through it. It just wants to kill you. Oh. All right, fine. This is this. Players will always subvert you. Meanwhile, that bartender who's supposed to give them the flippin' quest, just you described a trinket on the belt too much, or you spent that one extra detail on like, oh yeah, like you're like, I need to give him like some character shtick. Oh yeah, he wears a gauntlet still. So like, oh yeah, he's got a gauntlet, and you don't know that he's covering up his heinous burns, but they're like, that gauntlet, and then like they just fixate on it, and like now the gauntlet's the thing, and I'm like, it was an arbitrary detail I threw out there to make it look a little bit different than every other bartender I've ever described. But now I guess we have a 3-arc adventure on this fucking gauntlet.
Yeah. It's funny.
It can be a yes and moment as well, right?
Right. Well, exactly. Yeah.
It's actually an incredibly important gauntlet in my entire plot.
Yeah. No, it does, and you do that. Like you warp to the. This is that warping to the players sort of good ideas, right? Like the players have good
But
ideas.
that takes time to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's funny because I guess players never change, because my dad has a story from a Bushido RPG he played in back in, like, I want to say the 80s.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, after the campaign was over, like there was a shopkeeper that the GM's intention was that they would show up at this shopkeeper, they would just kill the shopkeeper, loot the gear, and go on with the adventure. And apparently they spent an entire session haggling with this guy because the players convinced themselves like the shopkeeper was so nasty and insulting. Like the GM thing was like, well, if I make him nasty and insulting,
Don't
we'll
let me
just
kill him.
kill him.
Yep.
And we can move on. And they were like, well, he wouldn't be talking to us this way if he wasn't able to just like kill all of us. So they just spent the entire session haggling over gear, and the actual adventure got pushed off for a week.
With the skill is knowing when to yes and your players into something really, really good, and to like, okay, we've wasted like 6 hours investigating a corner in a room now, guys. Like, there, so there is like, there's got to be limits to it, but I often find leaning into the players at least a little bit for like each interesting idea they have you tend to reap far more rewards.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's a lot better than trying to force to the letter what your vision is, and that's very much what we've built our campaign around. Is we set the stage, but then the players
you talked about your whale carcass, and just to use the gauntlet metaphor, like I had a MacGuffin item elsewhere in my adventure notes, right? Well, now the gauntlet's the MacGuffin item, like
Yeah.
because the player's interest on it is so high, you just you can kind of move that stuff around as long as you're recognizing it's all kind of all about story beats and suspense and conflict, and
Yeah.
the players will eventually develop their own conflict. If the conflict is the diplomacy angle, that they're trying to be diplomatic the whole time, you know, now you play up the diplomatic conflict. Now you give stakes
Yeah.
to it, and you start to do stuff. I love. I guess what I'm saying is I love RPG elements, and I love that you do this with
Fair
your
enough.
stuff.
So on that note, so I do want to get to your questions and your final wrap up questions and,
Yep.
and close this out. But before we get to that, so you see, I haven't been trying to bully you into playing, but I've just been describing all this. So I just want to get into Mithridates Altai really quickly.
Yep.
So in his
one final note before
yeah,
we move on from
yeah.
the R&R. I actually
Yeah.
really dig these guys. I think that they're really they read as
Oh,
very
yeah.
sympathetic actually
Yeah,
in the narrative.
we didn't answer the challenge question. So which coalition, if you played, which coalition would you join out of those 6?
Okay. So I think that the R&R are actually are actually pretty sympathetic as a coalition from like just a read through. Like this is a very sympathetic arc. Almost like if you were to hinge a shifting POV story, you might have them as like your sort of Jon Snow like sympathy character. That said, the Andrew pull towards the Ruyalar was felt. But the X pull is undeniably Solandic.
Fair enough. So
like it's undeniably like it's not even close. It was like read this like embittered. I'm like yeah, and then like hard people well acquainted with even worse hardship. They formed from the broken dregs of Lumineth society.
You sure there's not a little Andrew leaning toward that one too?
Oh, there certainly is. I love underdogs, and I think I pulled myself up from literally nothing, and so like there's narrative, and I think people are like too afraid of like just being themselves in a narrative or an RPG, and I'm like, no, you're your best asset. Like pick dials of yourself and crank them up or crank them down, invert yourself. Like well, this is what I would do. Well, let's do the opposite. Like you are a fantastic tool for RPGs. People are afraid of like role playing and lore and narrative because they don't think they're good writers.
Yeah.
Being a good writer has nothing to do with being a good storyteller. Like the best storytellers in your life are like often like just people who have interesting things to say, and it doesn't almost matter how they say it. They're entertaining. Yeah. Your grandparents, like that friend who you all know that just told the best stories in college. They can't write like they failed English, but they tell fantastic stories. Like it has nothing to do with how technically proficient of a writer you are. Storytelling is just be entertaining and honestly be yourself. You're a great asset in storytelling. Invert yourself. Like if you're like, yeah, I'm a pretty bitter guy. Well, for this story, I'm going to crank up the bitter this time. Like I'm,
or maybe you'll go Ruyalar and decide to be an optimist. See what that's like.
Yeah, what's it like to live in opposite land for a day? Like invert myself a little bit. But
so and you said about writing there, like that is, to me, that is certainly important. So when you submit a report, there's a field with 600 characters in the Google form where you can write like your narrative blurb, what's supposed to be going on with your report. So if you submit a model you painted, like you can be like, this is the regiment of whatever, or this is the character of whatever who's doing this. Like the important part, especially with writing, is like we're the writers. We have trained professional writers on staff to write the unfolding narrative. Like you guys just do you, and we will mash all that together and we'll tell the story. Like it definitely, no one needs to feel like, well, I'm not good enough to do this. Like everyone absolutely is.
Yeah. The 100% best backstory I ever received for a character in my nearing 30 years of GMing now. Okay. The best one I received was a McDonald's application filled out in character. A literal McDonald's application. I was running D20 Modern, back when it was like when D20 was just everywhere. And they went out and they grabbed a literal McDonald's application and filled it out as their character. Like, so like it gets to the point where it's like, do you have a criminal record? And it's like, yes, and then like elaborates on the criminal record and stuff like that in like a weird tongue-in-cheek manner. Like, this wasn't like, proficient writing. This was a literal job application, but like just the names they thought up and like how they answered the questions was funny, and it was one of the best backstories I've ever received. We always think. I remember I used to have this thing where I'm like, oh, a minimum of X words for your backstory, and you get the XP bonus, right? To try to get people
Yeah.
invested in their characters. And I realized that like having a little bit more of a laissez-faire, tell your story your way, was actually the answer than this rigid, ruled structure, this arbitrary value that I would set to things. And it's like
Yeah.
I see the world through my trained writer, went to school for it thing. But one of the things you realize when you read tons of different fiction and tons of different stories, Elmore Leonard is a technically kind of a shit writer, fantastic storyteller, probably one of the best.
Yeah.
Like, he tells a story like he's sitting across. Then he said, and she said this thing, but then I was like, and that's how he tells a story. He writes like that, and it's great.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
There's not a lot of that. It's sort of more experimental. Or maybe it exists and I just don't know it. Like you don't write with a structure that normally you expect. You write the way you talk, and you slaughter the punctuation. Yet somehow it really feels you're having a conversation.
Yeah.
So, just on that note, real quick, and then we can move on. So one of our writers that we brought on board, Leela, her whole professional thing is writing in second person, which is a very odd way to write, but describing like, you do this, you see this.
Yeah.
And we're actually adopting that for the the unfolded, not the unfolding narrative, the narrative paths that we present to the player is like, here's the situation you're in, to try to give that immediacy.
Second person forces what we call active voice too.
Yeah.
Like you're almost forced to be an active voice when you're saying you and then, and it's very active. It's not what used to kind of happen. Like you always see this.
Yeah.
It's no the immediacy, the engagement. It's active voice pretty much by default.
Because we learned a lot from Animosity too, and we were changing some stuff turn to turn to try to see like, well, does this work better? Does that work better? And yeah, the narrative path started off as me just more describing like, here's what's happening, and then I shifted more to like, this is happening to you now, deal with it. And that did seem to help. So also,
Made a difference.
I just sent you something over in the Discord chat.
To be checked now or later?
Now.
Oh, okay.
So this was a player submission we got, which is one of my favorite things ever. So this was when the Caradron player got on board with the group project to airdrop Stonehorns. So it's just a happy airdrop Stonehorn.
This is the MS Paint like style with like a little like cloud action blur tool from Photoshop.
This.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, like, on the one hand, we're this serious, massively multiplayer narrative collaboration thing, and we're trying to tell this serious story with serious stakes, and like then our players throw this in there, and it's just the best thing I've ever seen.
I love that they got like, this happy face, like its mouth is open, like the tongue's like lolling out, like just
it's just so happy to be dropped from a Caradron airship.
Yeah, the Magneto perfection meme is being brought up in chat gang right now, like just perfection.
And they planned this throughout the whole campaign, and they literally, this was the capping stone to explode the whale. Just threw a bunch of stone. Anyway, Blaze of Glory.
Yeah, all campaign long, they were like, we want to airdrop Stonehorns, but like they couldn't figure out when to do it, and then they were like, this is when we want to airdrop Stonehorns.
This is our moment.
And, yeah. So yeah, that's my favorite image to come out of that, is just the happy falling Stonehorn. And I love how it's like a so cheerful, happy. Clear blue sky.
Like there's like a couple little puffs, like little cotton candy puffs of cloud and like clear blue, and it's so happy. It's so happy.
like all campaign long, we've been describing how this is like a frozen winter underworld, and like it's always in perpetual twilight, and then we just get this. It's like, yep, that's great, cool.
There's in rule development, there's like sort of an appeal to intuition, is like if your players always think of something a certain way, just make it that way too. Like that's another sort of.
Yeah, fair.
Sorry. Airdropped out of a KO ship, like.
Like it's a C-130.
Go go go. Funny. So you were gonna talk about Alti real quick.
Yeah. So just to get that in there. So because I know. So what I was starting to say is like I know you can't play, and I wasn't going to try to bully you into it, but I'm secretly trying to bully you into it by reading all this.
I know.
So I just want to do
It's
a dramatic
compelling.
reading.
It's compelling.
Dramatic reading of Mithridates Altai here. So his backstory. I don't think you want me to take the time to go through the whole thing, but he starts with a quote where he says, "I have lost everything: my home, my soul, and my purpose. My chains. I spent my life, and much longer since, fighting to be what was expected of me. Their wars, their causes. No longer. I am Mithridates Altai, born to be a king, raised to shape the fate of nations, forged in battle, reborn in the infinite night. My past is gone, destroyed in a flash of light, in Amasia, and a rain of fire upon Baikal. My shackles are broken. My time has come."
Bound and now. Like just fucking metal.
And then his actual story starts with "Destiny has not been kind to Mithridates Altai."
What I find is that the way he says it, right? Like the last sentence of what you read,
Yeah.
we know that it was like a huge amount of setback, and now he's just kind of been given a new lease. But the last sentence you read, it almost feels like it builds up to something. So you can he's retelling his own story to himself to reforge his own legend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also like, so it's, a single sentence: destroyed in a flash of light in Amasia and a rain of fire upon Baikal. Like that's two massive, like there's literally over 100 players worth of narrative
Yeah.
in that sentence.
Mm-hmm.
But for
Yes.
him it's just his past.
Yeah, this is the for me it was Tuesday line, which is one of the absolute greatest boss dialogue moments in all of art, not just campy movies, all of art.
Yeah.
Of course, all of Chatking knows I'm referring to Raul Julia's portrayal of M. Bison in the Street Fighter 2 movie or Street Fighter movie in 1996 or whatever, 97.
Unbelievable!
So, yeah, it was a had me at hello. I saw like NPC like unaligned. I'm like, ooh, unaligned, nice, and like immediately.
It goes into further. He had sacrificed his very soul for the expectations of others, but in the end, everyone he held faith in had failed him. The path once set for him was irrevocably gone, and his future was his own to forge. So again, you can't fight directly for him, but you can kind of try to convince your satrap and your fellow players in your coalition to support him, and that's kind of how that mechanic will work out.
I can't fight directly for him, but I can totally subvert my coalition on purpose.
But at the same time, so what's going to happen is you're going to get pushback because your satrap still wants the throne for themselves.
Yeah, and my player and the other players I'm playing.
Yeah,
with.
and the other players could very much see him as a usurper who doesn't. Why would you want a vampire leading, an elf kingdom? So, we we'll see how that works out.
Yeah.
That's entirely in the player's hand. We have no idea how that's going to shake out.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean this. I wanted to last year if we did this. I'm like, next year I'm totally gonna play this, and I'm like, and then narrator, he did not go on to totally play in this. Life intervened, but
yeah.
I mean, the date again.
July 7th, or wow, why do I keep saying 17th? July 14th. So coalitions open July 1st, so you can get into the private player channels on the Discord. That'll be July 1st. And then July 14th, turn 1 begins, and I believe turn 5 ends August 18th or something like that.
Lexopolis, convince the old guy on the ancient elf Barca lounger to back the vamp.
It's a goal. Hashtag goals.
Yeah, hashtag goals. There you go. Campaign goals. I feel like I've already warped people. Anyone who watches this episode and goes on to play Animosity 3, I've already poisoned their brain children. Like, I've already, by saying words out loud, I've already started to shift the narrative.
Yeah.
Like, I've already, like, because there's going to be people out there who are like, F what Meph wants, and then there's going to be people out there who are like, yo. And And just like by taking an interest in something, I've shifted perspective. Like it's interesting, like how storytelling influences us more than.
Well, you have no idea, like the way people, the way people's perspective even influence within their coalition. You start a rumor, and it just runs through the Discord, and
You know,
sometimes we curtailed it, sometimes we didn't.
See, like, I mean, that's got to be like I almost like I'm sitting here and I'm almost wondering about your perspective of what it's like to watch. You know, how many players did you have in the last Animosity?
90.
90, nearly 100.
90 fully active. We had floating players as well.
Yeah,
A
the
few.
90 in the Discord that we can say for certain submitted reports. Yes.
Yeah. So you have 90 players, 90 active players, and what's it like to just your team of writers and GMs and organizers and just what 9 of you I believe you said there were just kind of lean back in your chair one night and just kind of like scroll back through a bunch of messages of people kind of losing their minds over your narrative that
You're not leaning. That's the problem. You're not
you're
leaning.
not leaning back. No.
It's too many messages.
Yeah.
Okay. So
You're forgetting. This is all time zones. It never stops.
Yeah, we literally, some of the coalitions, we had players taking shifts where like the shift in one time zone would hand off to another shift, be like, all right, this is what we talked about, like catch them up, and then they would go to sleep, and then when they come back, like the other time zone would catch them up.
amazing.
Self-organizing was amazing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like, I mean, this is the sort of thing that gives me, honestly, faith in humanity. Like, I think games make the world a better place. Like, games and
I agree.
stories. Like, man, that's... Like, I have some questions, but I don't know if they're important. This just sounds like a blast of a time.
Spit them out.
So just one final
No
point, which
stupid
is that
questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would agree with that. So the final point you're asking about, like, if things were, I tried to say like there's no railroading; it's completely open ended, and it is, but it isn't. In that, at the end of the day, one of these 7 characters will be the Seraph. Like we've actually had internal conversations about this. Like we're not going to allow a player, through cult of personality to try to become Seraph themselves. We're not going to allow the Prime Dominion to just get blown up. Like there's a meme in the server which is like, please do not blow up the sun.
Yeah, there's a black hole. There's a black sun that is what
Yeah,
stabilizes the Prime Dominion.
That's funny.
but so yeah, like what one of these 7 will be Seraph, but who it ends up being, like we don't know that any more than the players do.
Right. We're talking Animosity campaigns here. Animosity 3 specifically, which is going to kick off on July 14th.
Yes, not 17th.
Not the 17th. It is the 14th. You've already said the 17th too many times, so other people have already, like, the numbers have hit their brain and they're just rattling back and forth. So, yeah, we're talking Animosity campaigns, a global narrative event, a competitive narrative event, I'm told.
Yosh.
So could someone else if we kill our leader again? Or could be someone else if we kill our leader again? Wait.
No. So we had about half our figureheads died last time, and most of those were dusted by player characters, and I'm not going to say that it's impossible to kill a figurehead this time, but we're going to make it much more difficult because we found it much harder to tell the story when, like, the characters we set up the story with got eaten by a
like a solar whale.
a Zangor.
Okay.
Drunken
No,
Zangor.
we had a drunken Zangor who was like, I want to know what it's like to eat witch elf flesh. So like that was his whole goal, was like, I'm gonna kill the witch elf and then eat her corpse.
Kicker. That sounds like a challenge.
So the thing, so after, because the worst part, and again I'm holding you up here, but the worst part.
No, you're not holding me up at all. You're not holding.
This is what I mean about narrative. Like, come away from a tournament and have conversations like we're having right now. Like that's my throwdown to the match play people, because so the expedition, they wrote a bunch of they had a big collaborative project among their players where they were going to hunt down and kill the pilgrimage's figurehead. And the pilgrimage anticipated something like that was going to happen, so they set up a whole collaborative story project where they had a decoy figurehead. so the project of them killing the figurehead, like that all became that was written into the story because like they did their plan worked, but it was a decoy because the other players had installed the decoy to try to attract that. But then over in left field, they're from a different coalition is the Zangor, and like his followers were like, yeah, we want to go eat this figurehead because we're Zangors, and they ended up killing her. So like the grudge match turned into this decoy thing, but then the figurehead died anyway because Zangors.
Actually, I kind of
Um,
love the out of left field, like the like the piano falls, just like
so like for the pilgrimage players again, so much, and I feel like this gets lost in trying to explain what animosity is. Like so much of the experience comes from when we drop the unfolding narrative and players read through it for the first time. So the pilgrimage players, like the expedition players, they read that and they're like, yeah, we got her, and then they're like, oh no, it was a decoy, and the pilgrimage players are like, yeah, our decoy worked. And then we go down a few more story sections because they're usually broken into like 3 or 4 paragraph sections. You get down there and it's like, oh no, she got killed by a Zangor.
well, you think about the tension at play and your emotions of reading it, like the yes, no, yes, and the stakes that are
Yeah.
invested
Or
in a story
you
like this. Yeah.
Well,
could
and the
see that
worst
in the
part,
Discord after people were reading, and then people start talking. It's like, wait, I haven't gotten to that part yet. Don't say anything else. And tension,
yeah,
tension,
and so
really.
just like we're seeing with AOS third, like you get that first like half hour of hot takes with being like, well, we're out of the game, we're screwed,
Yeah.
or
Oh yeah.
whatever, and then they pull it together again. But so that you were saying about sitting back and watching, so that's always interesting to watch.
No,
And it can be hard to watch because like you can see players just get their hopes and dreams
frustrated.
are just crushed.
Yeah.
And that just comes back to the numbers. But so just to
But
finish that story.
share that moment of insight, like when players act like that they're actually really invested.
Yeah, so that was something I learned from organizing narrative events locally. Is like when players are complaining about your event, it's still a good thing because they care about it. And like I would get really worried because I'm like, wow, they hate this. Like I'm doing a terrible job. But then when I would try to address their concerns, like they would also get upset about the fixes, and I'm like, oh, they just want to complain.
Well,
Like they're enjoying it, so they're just grousing about it. Like, oh, okay, cool.
I think that's part of something we need to learn as a community. Like we talk about like narratively getting narrative into our DNA a little bit more as like the way we approach and talk about. It is my dream that we talk about Age of Sigmar, even though I have my competitive skew and match play skew and so on and so forth. It is my dream that we talk about things more holistically. That's why I do the show the way I do it. Like knowledge isn't linear. People don't realize that like your brain doesn't go A B C D E. Like it's a shotgun blast and the letters are everywhere and there's numbers mixed in and every now and then a fucking new cat like goes flying past. Like brains are how we connect to information is out there. Usually it's at an emotional level first. Um,
Yeah.
it's okay to let people have some breadth of negativity. It's like sometimes I wonder how much is people being negative about something and how much is people being negative about people being negative about something. Like which is the greater weight of
Well,
it, you know.
well, so I saw someone on Jonathan, I think, was his handle. Someone on Twitter earlier who's like, well, the only people I see complaining about the points are the people who are complaining about the people who are complaining about the points. Um, and like I read that and then I open Facebook, and if you go to the chat, I just sent you something. Like the first thing I see on Facebook is this image. If you want to throw it up in the stream, Soulblight Gravelords is pathetic. This is stank.
Well, I don't
Yeah.
even
Say,
factor I don't even factor Facebook into my when I was
I just for a screen cap like that.
filter.
it does
That just
but that moment had to be fantastic for you. That linear experience, right? Like that
yeah.
bing click over.
But so yeah, I do understand where you're coming from. Like it's a whole conversation, and we as an internet community need to get better at it at all
We
levels,
need to give each
including
other a little bit of space to commiserate, but then in turn we also need to have like sort of our safety rails up for what our threshold is of negativity we'll tolerate. So like it's difficult because you want to give. I mean, this is the classic like your right to throw a punch ends at my nose, right? Like right
yeah.
before my nose. Like the you want people because Vanilla Sauce, I was cracking with him. He's been on the show a couple times. Alex, fantastic person. Him and Sam both have on more than one occasion like talked me down during a bad mental health spout, like gone out of their way and their day, in what is for many intents and purposes a parasocial relationship to say, hey, Meph, like, you okay? Like, we saw you made this Twitter post, or we saw you on Facebook. So fantastic people. Vanilla Sauce, he's one of those people who just needs to like vent some negative frustrations every now and then. But if you talk to him, he's a lovely, caring, deeply emotive individual. And you're like, we've like kind of what you said, like people blow steam off about your game kind of because they care about it. The worst response is no response. You want strong intentional, the 2s and 9s. You want strong emotional one way or the other. And I do think that being antagonistic to either or is the bad thing. And the person who says it's more people, I quipped which is heavier, not that the one doesn't exist. Oh, hey, there's speak of the devil. There's Vanilla Sauce, and Princess Wigglebum renewing her tier 1 sub for 6 years. So thank you so much, and thank you both, by the way, sincerely for helping me all out.
Yeah.
But like the thing is like how much is that is like, okay, like I make my negative hot take, and somebody makes their positive raw Games Workshop take, and we both have our emotional serotonin, dopamine, hit my veins moment with our reactions. How much of the antagonizing of each other is the problem versus just being negative? I'm asking this openly. I have no idea. Like, this is
well, and I'm, as Nuno can attest, I'm very much guilty of that, because I have, as I said going into this earlier, like I am a vindictive bastard, and I have huge chips on my shoulders. So I'm part of the problem. I don't pretend that I'm not.
Oh, you've been throwing down the gauntlet all night tonight. Like, narrative play isn't competitive. Come play Animosity. Like, if that's what you think, come play it. And honestly, is that not like just a rephrase of the take? Like, if you think a certain way about an experience, come actually do that thing, and then reformulate your opinion.
There was a gauntlet I threw down on Twitter earlier, and I'm pretty sure I got ignored, and probably rightfully so. But one of Rob Symes' people, and I just say Rob Symes' people because I assume like everyone who has a stylized goblin image of themselves as their avatar with red eyes is one of his people. I don't really know. I don't know. They're all part of the same.
It's
like
the knee stabbers, right? Like the knee stabbers,
whatever they're.
Yeah.
So anyway, one of them was saying about wanting to cry for his gits because they're going to spend this edition on a shelf, and like what jumps to mind immediately. And the gauntlet I laid down was like, so hear me out. Lumineth are, invading your caves because they don't want you near their bright, shiny cities. They're bringing 2,000 points. How many points do you need to bring to make that a fair match in your mind? Because to me, it's like, oh, Gloomspite got nerfed? Cool. So just bring 3,000 of them and have a game and see where it goes. Mm-hmm. To me, that makes an interesting battle.
Well,
is outside the match play, like you need 2,000 points in a force org, and this somehow is balanced. Like when, so but basically the that guy I was talking about earlier, like I played one of the most serious games I ever have. I put him 700 points down, so it was my Flesh Eater courts before their new book versus his Daughters of Cain, and I watched 2 units of Witch Elves with one of their big Coven Thrones lawnmower through my army. And I'm like, okay, this is fair, cool.
Mm-hmm. Well,
match play isn't fair.
Well,
Never was.
And that's the thing is like, chasing parity it's like chasing. I'm gonna get political on my own show. It's like chasing equality. You never achieve true equality, like in any society. But the goal is to always try to do it. Right? Like you can never, you're never going to be, maybe you are, but I'm not a utopian. I think that like it's hard, and humans are complicated, and societies are complicated, and even if we all agree in like 100% egalitarianism, like suddenly there's a hurricane, and now it's not equal, and now we need to like fuck with stuff again.
Yeah.
Like, so like it's always something to chase, just like game balance is always something to chase, but it's never a state of equilibrium. You never achieve it. And
Yeah.
it's important to be aware of that when you're factoring in your analysis of how things are. The only true measure of whether a game is balanced or not is it better now than it was before? Yes, no. And what
Mm.
does better
Yeah.
mean? We can split hairs over. But the only true measure you have on how good a game is how good is it compared to itself. We haven't put in the time yet with AOS 3.0 to tell how good it is now compared
I'd
to
agree with
before.
that.
Like we don't
No,
know, and every army's going up
You
about 8%. Some went up
yeah,
more,
and
but like there's just
yeah, and you can't tell that from reading Facehammer screenshots of the General's Handbook.
and even then,
see,
like,
but
go ahead, go ahead, Nuno,
what you're
go ahead.
saying, Meph, I completely agree. What sometimes I fear is like, it's true. You're never going to get the perfect game, so let's not get people's hopes high that it's going to be perfect.
You don't want
But
perfect
what
to be the
worries me
enemy of good, right? Like,
exactly. But what worries me when people say, okay, it's never going to be perfect, then weirdly, it's almost it has to be black and white. Okay, if we can't have complete parity, well, you can't expect anything. It'll never be balanced. Let's not even try. It's like
yeah, that's the
that's not where we want it to go.
yeah, that's the way to take my own words and then be bad with my words. Like my
Exactly.
point isn't that we're not going to be perfect, so don't bother. My point is like always chase it, but don't like
You
let
walk towards it. Yeah.
yeah, don't let that expectation of perfection get in the way of enjoying what's good and what's in front of you. And sometimes that means making your own fun. You know, like sometimes that means giving yourself your own stakes. Like I
Create the event that you want to play in.
there you go. Or
Chat gang.
yeah, there you go. Let's see. Catching up on chat here.
Always a good thing.
Princess Wigglebum and Vanilla Sauce shoutouts again. Thank you. I like my combination of wild and kempt going on. Like it's just chaos on top. It's kind of like the Mephisto mullet, all chaos on top, but like business on the sides, I guess.
So if I can jump in and reply to chat gang real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
They're part
I
of the
need
show.
to
They are the
address
show within the show.
I need to address Biscuit Butt here, which so I've been spicy tonight, so I'll continue the trend and just say I will fight you. The double turns are a good thing. They always have been. They always will be. This is another hill I will gladly die on.
I came around to double turns, to be honest. Coming over from my like MTG, like imagine everyone gets time walk in the game. Like, isn't that super powerful? The problem isn't necessarily the double turn. It's what is giving it a decision to take it or not. Like, and I think AOS 3.0 is trying to do that with the way command points are allocated, scoring, being able to remove an objective. Like, before they tried to do it really sort of like haphazardly and weakly, with like, oh yeah, you can activate the endless spells first. Ugh. Like, that doesn't incentivize me enough to see if I get to pummel your army for an entire extra turn. Like, so like it looks like they've been mindful of it, but when it gets right down to it, why is the double turn hype? Because it's the KO punch. It's the puncher's chance. It is engaging. The double turn is hype. Mechanics got nothing to do with it. I don't actually care about the rules balance of the double turn. I care about the engagement of the double turn. Like, it's the V trigger in Street Fighter. Like, you're looking at somebody who's got this much health out of that much health, and, so for those of you who are just listening in pure audio, you're looking at somebody with 20% health versus 100% health, but they've got a full meter. You're going, they can still run this back. That's what the double turn does to you psychologically. If you're out of a game, you're like, I can still run this back. And if you're in the lead, it keeps you honest for the win. And if you're already winning and you've done everything correctly and you should win and you get the double turn, it's a win more, so who gives a crap? The game's over quicker and it probably should have been because you already played well to that point. Go ahead.
I would absolutely bite that and just like let's see, I have a an external speaker here, so I'll just crank up the volume on this bad boy and just hold it up to people when they fight me about the double turn, because everything you just said is absolutely true. And that's why I like it, because my big problem with 40K, and I've been playing 40K since 3rd edition, I'm literally building Sisters of Battle right now, is that it's always been my experience, every edition, you lose that first roll-off, and you're probably going to lose the game because the other guy shoots first, and you're Greedo, you just got shot first, and now they're playing with their full army.
A
You've already
Star
taken
Wars
hits.
fan, I see, knowing knowing
Yeah.
who got shot first.
I thought you might like that. So it always feels like you're going in with not an entirely full army, because whoever was on the first turn, was able to take your stuff off the board usually before you got to use it. And the double turn gives you the hope, like, well, yes, I went second and I took this punch, but maybe if I get the double turn, I can swing right back and take it back. And that's just makes for a much more interesting and fun experience to me than like, oh, I won the first turn roll off, I'm on the back foot for the rest of this game.
I mean, on the flip side of that is when your opponent does win the double turn, you do feel that same like I'm fucked sense of. See, I'm getting better at like not swearing because my kids have really been on my back. Like, Dad, don't say that. Like, that was a naughty word. And I'm like, first of all, I don't have the time to explain to you as an English lit major that there are no such thing as bad words, only bad contexts, and then go into this whole thing. Well, what about this word that is really bad you say never say? I'm like, you're right, but I'm trying to teach. Never mind. Like, you win, child. Like, child logic.
Yeah.
If you ever have to
You win,
argue against
child.
child logic, like, you will learn how weak your arguments are.
So
No, the takeaway, like, the people who feel desperate against the double turn, I think, is like everyone has a game where they're like, I could have won this, but I got double turned. Everybody has that. Everyone has this game came down to the priority roll. If it was you go, I go. And so there's a lot of like, there's also, it's really like glass half empty, half full arguments, right? Like, it gives you a chance if you're out of it. And, and then the debate becomes, should you be in it? Should you not be? I don't want to totally reject everybody else's opinions, but I do want to challenge people who think that the double turn lost them the game to go look at all the other decisions up until that point. Like, we always identify the obvious thing, not even necessarily the most correct thing. This goes back to narratives. You're formulating a narrative perspective on how you arrived to the conclusion that the double turn is bad. History is told narratively as much as people think it's this empirical thing.
Yeah.
The histories we recall are the ones with the best narratives. There are historians out there who can one-to-one show you diary entries with dates and like logs of how many barrels of gunpowder were at this battle and stuff like that. And they just show you the data, the empirical information. The best historians are the ones that build the context around it to deliver it in a story that you give a fuck about. This is how we formulate information, or this is how we formulate our perspectives on reality effectively, is just the narratives we're fed. That's what rhetoric is in politics. I'm using rhetoric right now. I'm trying to talk to you in a certain manner to get you to formulate an opinion. That's how this all works. So I just implore people to look to something else when you're complaining about something. Just not that you're wrong. Just get a bigger opinion. Go on.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. And what you made me think of there is like that's literally what we're doing when we write the unfolding narrative, is the mechanical results from all the reports that are submitted, and then the contents of the reports themselves. Like that is all data, and then we, the writers, turn that into something that you, the readers, give a fuck about, to use your phrasing.
Sexualize everything, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to kind of put the ribbon on the double turn conversation, because we've been having this for 5 years now. I'm sorry, the priority roll conversation. I challenge 40K players to, if they're such masters of gameplay, get better than the double turn, brah. Like, I dare my opponents to double turn me and beat them because I'm that good at the game. Gladiators play in the weather. If you're truly great, you play through adversity. That's what makes you competitive and good. Not that in an ideal set of circumstances and an ideal time with ideal everything around it, you got a perfect 8 hours of sleep, your job doesn't overwork you, you have income, comfort to do all this stuff. What makes you a competitor is your ability to deal with all the shit at all the time and focus in and play a game. Well, that's what makes you a competitor. That's what makes you a great athlete. You can be the best free throw shooter in the world in the gym. If you can't do it at a game when the crowd is screaming at you, you're not the best free throw shooter in the world. Like, it's that simple. And a little self-ripping on Giannis there.
So I agree that is the ribbon. And to Compkilla's point, love you, Comp. I do understand the frustration of feeling, you got double turned and you got kicked in the knees. I get that. But for the same time, for me, it's also, I had one game where I had bought worst decision I ever made. I bought already built Stormcast off of this dude. He was getting rid of them. I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good price. And I bought them off of him, and it was a terrible mistake because they were built just absolutely terribly. And he was selling them because he felt he couldn't win with them, and he had just gotten, so he replaced them with Maggotkin, and I played a game against him with his models exactly like it was garbage list. It was like the original AOS 1 starter, and then like some Vanguard Raptors and just some other just it was absolutely terrible. I had understrength units and stuff, and I would have won that game if I had gotten the double turn on turn 5. Like I fought him all the way through, and I would have won. And what kept me in the game was like maybe I can get the double turn and I'll be able to pull this off. And I could. It came down to like how the points would have racked up on the objectives that we could have reached. I would have won it if I had gotten that double turn.
Yeah.
But without the double turn mechanic, I probably would have just thrown the towel in by 3 because I'd be like, well, I go, you go. Statistically, you know, you're a step ahead of me. I can't catch up.
Well,
But that kept me fighting and engaged, and it made for a really fun game trying to beat him with his own models.
well, as a Magic the Gathering player, and it wasn't the ribbon. We've got the double bow on this one now. That's how thoroughly solved the double turn is for me. We have 2 bows on it. It gives weaker armies, and I know in an ideal world all armies are totally equal, right? No, you don't actually want that. You want imbalance to force the wheel to turn and keep us innovating and keep stuff like that happening. You actually don't want true parity. Again, we want to always aspire for it, never achieve it. Because then equilibrium and stasis are lame. Stasis metas suck. But no, so like you have armies that like will be like weaker than other armies, and like you start to do something called in Magic the Gathering playing to your outs. Your out becomes a double turn. You know that if the game goes A B with our optimal 100% ideal deployments and like bell curve dice rolls, that army kicks the crap out of my army. There is nothing I can do. I have drawn the L. Like it's some army out there, some opponent is carrying your L at all times. You just got to dodge them or get lucky.
X gonna give it to you.
Pretty much, yeah. So they've got your L and they're just holding it for you. But like you're like, if I actually do the boneheaded play here, which is deploy aggressively to where if like they take it, I'm dead. Like, cool. But I was dead if I played safe and went back and forth anyway. But if I go aggressive and I get the double, I can win this. And so now you go into this like the hypest line of play on the planet because if you play conservatively,
the Hail Mary.
Yeah, the Hail Mary. And that's hype. That is super hype. That's awesome. That's the like this guy outclasses me or outskills me or their army's better than me. But you're like, I've got that puncher's chance. Sometimes you just hit them on the button and they go down.
So
I think the whole thing is it wasn't necessarily that having 2 turns in a row was necessarily a bad thing in itself. I think it was an experiential thing. If you somehow found a way, which I hope that the new command points and reactive abilities can find a way to do that,
yes,
essentially kind of sort of smooth the experience of the double turn, the other person still gets to go twice and do everything, and they are at an advantage. Experience of what's happening is now going to feel different, and then you're still going to have the chance of you having that advantage. So the advantage never disappears, but I guess it's smoothened out. I guess maybe that might make a complete difference, because I don't think it was an issue of 2 turns in a row. It was the fact that it was a very fast turn advantage.
Yeah. Well, and like I rely on skill gaps and double turns to outplay my bad matchups. Like this is an army that beats me. I got to be better than the opponent, hopefully, because if they know the basic lines of play, then they should beat me on this battle plan. But like I've always got that double turn. I like that. Sorry, go on. You're Alex.
So we've ranted so far afield with the double turn. So I just have a few things I want to say real quick, and then we can finish nailing this coffin shut. So first up, look what you did, Biscuit Butt. Second, we were talking about the Hail Mary, but Kai Leonis all the way back in Animosity, the original Animosity 4 in 2009, he coined the phrase the epic Stoneballs maneuver. So that I think that's what you're thinking of there, Meph.
Is that what it is? Yeah, like just the
Yeah.
the absolute cojones on this person to pull this play.
The audacity.
Yeah, the audacity play. Yeah.
Capacity.
And finally, so when it comes to double turn, I go, you go, whatever. The best game of 40K I ever played was against my brother, and this was all the way back in third edition. If you'll notice my
I've got my second ed Dark Eldar codex somewhere. I can track.
um so anyway, what we did, we were playing on my parents' dining room table, and what we did was so back then you just had the phases: movement, shooting, and assault. And what we did was we alternated. So I think I'm trying to remember. I don't think it was unit by unit, but it was player by player. So like we both moved, and then we both, like, I would move, he would move, then I would shoot, he would shoot. I would do my assault phase, he would do his assault phase, and no, like, we would put down markers, but we removed no casualties until the very end of the turn. And that was honestly the best 40K I've ever played.
Interesting.
Was just completely rehashed the classic turn structure.
I want to touch on the best game real quick before we get out of here. Again, the hard out is your guys' time, not mine. As long as the conversation's interesting, I'm good to keep talking. Or I'm not stepping on anyone's toes. Vanilla Sauce actually had a tweet today. I mentioned him again. Absolute fantastic friend of the show. Been on the show once. We have since hung the "I told you so" banner. Him and I have matching copies of the "I told you so" banner. We've since hung it for Gargants, for Mega Gargants, for Sons of Behemoth. We were right. Basically, everyone else was wrong. 3.0 has made us even more correct. So we've dusted it off. We've hung the banner. It's above our heads. We did the show on it. But he was talking about how, like, the engagement of the game now with 3.0, the back and forth, the doing it, you're more engaged turn to turn, and I think that has to mitigate some of the feels bad of, like, the double turn happening and be like, okay, I'm just gonna go buy us both beer. You do what you're doing. I mean, the only problem I have now is when do I buy my beer if I have to keep playing the game with my opponent? Disgusting. So, the question I had, is the best game, the perfect game of Age of Sigmar. This sort of notion of a platonic state of gaming. Does that exist? I mean, this is super philosophical now. I posit
Isn't it's narrative.
so it is. It's narrative, right?
It's narrative. That's the hot take.
See,
No, I'm actually joking. I believe in, like, complete different demographics.
Yeah.
The different people look for different things in the game, and I think that conversation just gets muddled.
Yeah. So I mean, you want to expand on that a little bit, because I think that's a super prescient take. Like, the demographics are different than I think of how we think about this game.
It's completely not prescient. I'm literally, like, just stealing this from Vince Venturella. This was something that I guess it was kind of knew it, but you didn't have the words to essentially vocalize it.
He did that
it's
with
essentially
he
the
did
player
that with my
demographics.
take about coherency too, where I'm like, I've spoke for like 3 hours about my problem with coherency, and he said one sentence that summed up everything I said for 3 hours, and I'm like, damn you, Vince, stop. So go on, Nuno. Sorry.
Was it? It was the MTG ones. What were they called?
The psychographic profiles. It's
psychographic profiles.
It's
yes.
Johnny, Timmy, Spike, and Johnny wants to express something. Timmy wants to experience something. This is usually like the big stompy monster player, because they want to, like, be Godzilla. That's the experience they want. And then Spike wants to express something. So Spike is usually.
I would advocate that the Timmy may also want to express being a general on a hill, commanding his troops. So it's not necessarily the big stumpy monster. I think I'm a Timmy. I used to be more of a Johnny. I think I ticked that box, and I'm now old and tired.
Yeah.
I think it's like the word you used, I think, is the best way to express it. This experience.
Yeah. Like that, and that's the thing is, like, is Timmy's don't necessarily look to, like, rule and, like, things like that. They're looking to experience something. That experience could be like, I am a battlefield tactician, standing back with a snifter of brandy, like, commanding my troops, and that's what they're interested in. So, like, they almost don't even care about winning the game per se. They just want to have that feel of being that general. Johnny's want to express something. We're the ones who, like, we have a combo we want to show off, or we have a thought experiment we're trying to see if it works or not, or we find, like, cool tech and we just, like, want to do the cool tech. So we usually want to express something. Johnnies and hobbying are also usually pretty like, those are like the very, the spike of competitive painting is going to just want to win. They're going to go with the non-metallic metals to like, they're going to know the painting rubric, and so they're just going to try to like crush all of that specifically. Whereas like the Johnny of painting is going to try to like just really experiment with the technique, really try to see what they can show, and the Timmy of painting is going to like, that bust just looks sweet, so I want to paint it. Like, like, and
So I think I know what happened. When I was only playing, I was Johnnying my list. So, list building is a part of our lives that consumes a lot of time, right?
Yeah, that's where the
Once I
game.
started
That's
doing
part
it,
of the game. I think we don't pay enough attention to is the actual list building. Go on.
yeah. I think my Johnny moved to event organizing. That became my expression.
There you go.
Think I guess if you're a creator, you want to create something. It could be a list,
Yep.
could be like, I think I'm still a Johnny in how I convert. I on purpose have the original model, and I don't want to build the original model. I want to kit bash the same unit from other parts.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I don't know why, don't ask me. Just
Yeah.
to be a contrarian.
Yeah.
I want mine to look different somehow.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be fancy, but I want it to just be different. And I think once I started running events, I think my sort of trying to express something about myself kind of veered, as a GM, like you want to create something cool and new for other people
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
experience. So I guess that impetus is still there. It just has shifted how it's expressed. No longer, I mean, I need rules in my game. I need my rules to feed a nice experience. So rules are still important.
Yeah. No, I mean rules are the dialogue through which we have a common ground. I mean, rules are very important. I don't want my least favorite take is that narrative thinks rules don't matter. Like I hate that. Like I hate the
I'd absolutely agree with that.
you agree with that, or I'm sorry, agree with me, or you agree with the fake the take I said? Sorry.
No, I agree. Just keep talking.
Okay.
I butted in. I'm sorry.
No. I just my least
Finish
favorite
the thought.
take is that like narrative players don't care about the rules, or the flip side of it, the bad side of it is like is this joke I see going around the internet where like when a rule is bad they're like, oh don't worry, it's a narrative rule, everybody, and then like
Yeah, I
it
hate that.
forces this dichotomy between good rules and narrative that doesn't need to be there. Some of
Yeah.
the best rules ever written are purely narrative things. Like
They're the ones that
RPGs.
people have most fun as well.
RPGs.
Even in Age of Sigmar,
Yeah.
So Animosity is
the
named
Gargant picking
after.
the objective or something.
We're named after the Animosity rule.
Oh, it's our little ratto. I love rats.
Yeah, so this is Baron, one of our pet rats.
Oh, Baron's adorable. What a cutie. No, like I don't know, like some of the best written rules I've ever seen are in RPGs. I'm like literally like they're better designed than any minis game, and like Magic the Gathering gets this reputation as being like the better written rules set, and I'm like I have an RPG that has like three pages of rules, and they're watertight. They're perfection in terms of rules. Heck, Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition had basically perfect rules, and people hated it because it was too perfect.
Oh, hot take.
Like it had basically perfectly written rules, perfectly balanced. Like the problem with like homogenized or perfect rules is homogeneity. To make perfectly balanced rules, you need to like go homogenous. That's my ultimate fear, is that like rules end up homogenous rather than interesting. Which is just this internal conflict I have with Age of Sigmar rules, is because some rules are like purely narrative. I'm like, hey, that's funny, ha ha ha, or not narrative. Are purely like expressive, like like the, I mean, destruction tends to have a lot of these rules, right? Like Hand of Dust jumps immediately to my mind, where you look at it and you're like, this is a super powerful effect. But then like once you start to like really start to think about like the rules on display, you're like, this probably isn't like, this is a narrative rule. Nagash is the god of death, so she should be able to kill something outright. Now, how do we make that a rule that is compelling on the table, and they literally go outside of the game and have you hide a die in one of your hands, and that's the hand of dust that kills them. Like, that is a purely narrative thing, and it's like one of my absolute favorite rules. Like, it's just this, and then like mechanics wise, you're thinking about a watertight. That is anathema to the type of like rules writing that would be in like something like Magic the Gathering. They got rid of coin flips and bartering and like they got rid of with all of that outside external game shit. You've got a sideboard, which is a lot of fun, and you've got wishing for stuff in your sideboard, which is super super fun. But like for the most part, like external factors of the game completely gone. You never step up, and I'm like, yeah, that makes the game more balanced, but it gets less interesting. Like it's so for again, I don't have this solved. I don't have like a fixed point because sometimes I see a rule where I'm like, that is so fluffy it does nothing, and I'm like, this offends my rules sensibilities.
I feel like
agree. I
feel
really
like
don't
Croak,
like those rules.
I feel like Croak fell victim to that with his latest War Scroll, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, or sometimes this notion that destruction must be random, and therefore, like, so like they get a bunch of weird random rules, and I'm like, this is just so random. Why even print it? Like, just print something.
I think
Go ahead.
Less rules, but more interesting and better ones is better. Because
I'd agree with
sometimes
that.
it just feels like I'm reading like, my allegiance abilities. Like, this is like 5 or 6 rules that each do like one tiny little thing. Can I get like one thing that is cool? Is actually powerful and maybe doesn't
Yeah.
activate all the time, but it just characterizes my army. I don't need to remember it all the time. But sometimes I'm reading, it's like AOS reminders or something, because it's a lot of rules but of tiny little things.
Shoutouts to
And I
Davis,
don't
by
know,
the way.
maybe
He's
they are
working
meant to
very hard
address
on
something.
3.0 right now. Like, shoutouts to
Yeah,
AOS reminders
we're
creator
gonna
Davis. Yeah.
we're gonna have to kind of bring reminder tables
You're gonna have
to the game for the heroic abilities.
I have a hot take that I know Nuno will probably back me up on, which is that for narrative play you do not need to homebrew stuff, and in fact I'm at the point where I would actively discourage it.
Gross.
So like homebrewing.
What's this guy saying?
Yeah.
What?
Gross. Narrative, and you're not just making up your own poorly thought out rules. Are you even human? Like.
Oh yeah, all the narrative organizers suffer from that
Yeah.
curse. Like, we have rules already out there. We want to invent it again for our event. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so I ran over 2019, in addition to Animosity 1, I ran a bunch of narrative events for my local Warhammer store, and they were usually about 5 weeks each-ish, and then I would take a couple weeks off. And I did pretty much all of them directly out of the General's Handbook. Like, if it wasn't the current year, it was the past year or something, but I just lifted stuff out of the Games Workshop already provided it. I don't need to, like Nuno said, reinvent the wheel. Just pick and choose stuff that's already in the game. You don't need to manufacture new rules, because then what you're doing is you're throwing more rules at players. That they're already trying to keep track of their army, and now they're trying to keep track of, like you said, poorly play tested stuff you just cooked up.
I didn't say that.
And it just becomes an absolute.
For you, like your.
Yeah, it just becomes an absolute mess when you're just trying to do too much. Like you can play, in my opinion, like what Steve Herner does with his narrative tournaments like that. That's honestly really solid, because you have the story, you have what the conflict is while you're fighting, but then you're still playing normal Age of Sigmar.
But the tables are playing you is the big the holy events is like that the tables play, and it's the simplest thing, and you don't quite know what you mean when you say the tables play until you get there, and they're like, oh crap, like the tables, they hate you and they want you to lose. And like, so there is this like external factor, but like the closest thing to homebrew is he has holy damage, and holy damage just, it can't be prevented in any way. It is, but there a precedent for that exists too. That rule already exists, like with stuff like X's spear in the Null Myriad army. Like it ignores after saves and all that stuff. So you don't need to like write up different language. It's interesting because I feel like the best way to make homebrew is to just take something that exists and sort of cosmetically make it different. And I think that's just the best way to, like,
Nuno does that all the time.
Like, you take like
reskin. It was one of the.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You had. Yeah.
it's I think I learned that when I was kind of like, listening to either articles or like GM podcasts for role play. They say stop trying to rebuild new monsters. Like, just nobody cares what you have like behind your screen, and only you care. Only you are attached to the pristine, or gears and internal workings of the game. Nobody gives a crap. Like,
It's
reskin an existing monster, nobody knows what's behind the curtain.
correct.
And we all started doing that for like loads of artifacts and spell
Hmm.
lords. Like, nobody knows. You just describe it slightly differently. The effects actually work really well.
Yeah.
You don't need to change much.
Yeah, no, I mean it's your best shorthand. I mean, this is a narrative TO tip, by the way, and I'm taking this from RPGs. Is like just reskin stuff. Like you'd be surprised. Like the rule is usually printed there. Just copy paste that rule. Change the the specifics of the wording or the cosmetics of how the rule states itself. But like otherwise, you're just using the same. If it's a bravery bomb, find a bravery bomb that does what you want it to do. Copy paste and just switch the wording, like copy my homework, just make sure the teacher doesn't know. Like do that. Like
Yeah.
it'll save you tons of time and it will be a lot more balanced.
Oh, yeah.
Like
I'd absolutely agree with that. So yeah, that's just a big personal pet peeve is like narrative does not mean you have to
I mean
homebrew stuff in addition
this
to what
ties
GW's already done.
this ties immediately into one of the very earliest things you both said. I think it was actually Nuno said is like a narrative event for you can just be you've picked all the terrain on purpose because it serves the story and you're still just using the terrain rules. You just said
Yeah.
no, like there's a temple terrain rule and so that temple on the table has the temple terrain rule.
Yeah.
And you're just going through and you're applying the rules in a manner that helps make a cohesive story. This for me, this is the sweet spot. This is again I
Me,
think rules is the language. This is the dialogue, the common dialogue we dialect we share as gamers. Like
it already exists.
yeah.
If you just replace that poker chip by it
Yeah.
by a temple, by a magic, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, you could put like you could plonk down a piece of like treasure. Changes, maybe it doesn't change for someone who's there specifically for the competition, but as we all know, many people go to big tournaments simply because they want to play
It's just
and
an
meet
excuse to
people.
play. Yep.
they're
Yeah.
they're mild competitive players, and they
Yeah, I
can
mean,
play in.
yeah, you don't have to be Halo or Rob Symes or whoever. Like, I do understand like a tournament like ACO that Martin Orlando ran. Like you got 2 days and 5 games and good people. Like that's definitely a selling point I can respect.
No, I think that I mean most players are just looking for an excuse to play. It's been a great disservice that we've partitioned off narrative as like this
Absolutely.
separate thing. It's been a disservice to the community and
And
players.
I do feel that certain competitive voices have done that, but I feel like narrative voices have also done it to themselves.
Well, again, I've heard
And
the bad.
I hope we can push through that, and
I
that's something we're trying to
Yeah,
do.
I've heard the bad take from narrative players too, where they're like they make a bad pack and they're like, well, it's narrative, so it doesn't have to be good. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. You're
Yeah,
giving
I have.
you're
I,
What?
you're giving
Wait,
us a
people
bad
said
you're
that?
giving us a bad reputation. You're like it's narrative, so the rules don't have
What?
to be good. And I'm like, go just leave. You're the worst. Like so like I've heard
So
it. Go ahead.
we've seen both manifestations, right? There are people who play narrative and they care about the rules working. Like, even if it's like a narrative homebrew rule, you want the rule to be enforced. That's kind of how the world works, right? But then there are narrative players that will come to your game, and they're more interested in the role play in the battle, and they don't care about what happens. Now, it they do it too much, the players may not, this may not mesh together. Even they may both be narrative players. One is just way more narrative than the other.
Yeah.
yeah,
This can happen, but is more rare. Generally, it's something that never really provokes any friction.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Another, I do. We don't see eye to eye anymore, but I do credit Aaron Bostian with like a lot of what I've learned, and like Nuno and I know each other because of him. But there was one event, which narrative event, which stands out to me, which was Fox Hunt 3. And like you were saying about stuff outside the game, like rather than homebrewing stuff for your narrative event, adding stuff outside the game that gets players to interact, like to me, that's really cool. And one of the things, so Aaron did two things. one, you through the gameplay on the tabletops, you could earn clues, and you had to match. It was just like a little symbol, and you had to get like two different clues together to get some bonus in the last game of the day. But it was this thing where like you were trying to. It was a reason to break the ice with players you'd never met before,
Mhm.
because it's like, oh well, I earned this clue. I need to go around the room and ask if other people. And he also had a coin mechanic, and basically what would happen
I like this.
is so again, gameplay, you would earn coins, and then when it came to the clue mechanic, like you could do this thing like, well, I'll give you this clue, but I want coins. And what the coins did was you could call either Aaron or um Brian Orban over, the two guys GMing it, and be like, basically, I want to bend the rules of the game, and they'd be like, okay, you can do that, but it's going to cost you X amount of coins.
I like that.
So you could suspend and modify the rules of the games, like, hey, I want this charge to work, or I want to make a charge that's outside of any possible charge range, and to
Where
be like, okay, that I think what they would do is they'd be like, okay, tell me your narrative reason for why this should work. And if they liked it, they'd be like, cool, that'll be X amount of coins. Do you have it?
I'm
And then you could
literally
spend that.
I'm literally planning. Okay, so everyone knows this self promotion. I should probably promote better. The Rantathon's coming up. My Mental Health America charity is coming up July 31st. It'll be right here on my Twitch. Tons and tons of content creators will be on for that. A bunch of stuff, bunch of giveaways, so on and so forth. But party to that, everyone is trying to egg me on to like make like a chat gang-a-thon or a chat gang fest, or like run my own tournament. And I'm like, I've already, man, years ago, uh, I won't go into the tangent to tell this tangent. Anyway, I've already like started to scheme how to run a Skaven tournament. Like, I want to have a cheaters tournament, and I've decided that the best way to do this is to have the cheating above table. And so, like, I loved. I went to NashCon, and they have like schemes, which Vince Venturella, Tyler Emerson, they all like kind of work together to make these schemes, right? Which are sort of like other secondaries, and you get this like deck of cards, and it's like your sort of unique game mechanics. Like one of them is like the Curse of the King or something like that, to where like you have a model that is cursed in your army, and when it dies, it passes the curse on to another person, and if that model dies, it passes it back to you. And the whole goal of winning those like 3 victory points is you have to get your model killed, but not end up killing the thing that has it. You have to try to pass that curse, and you get this deck of, I think we got a deck of 7, and then you had 5 games, and so you picked 5 of them to play, and you played one each day. I want to do that except with cheats. So you get this hand of like cheat cards, that are like stuff like you can charge outside of 12 inches, or like like literal like cheaty Skaven cheaty mechanics. And so like if you get Warpstone,
that's a great example. That's a great example. I mean, I didn't even know that happened. That to me is already a narrative event. Never heard of it.
Yeah.
This is the
So
problem.
so
Right?
I have
You're
a
not even told that you can go to this thing, and this is not your regular, tournament. There's other things, and it's gonna be more fun because of it. I had no
NashCon's
clue.
fantastic. It's a 2-list format. We showed up, and Anthony Polcastro, like pretty much the terrain master in chief, had like printed off the terrain coins already. So you showed up to the table, all your terrain was set to begin with. So there was no that like extra 6 minutes of like rolling dice and figuring out terrain. That was all taken care of for you. You had the 2 lists, so the Johnny and me was just like, yee, like I got to like game 2 different lists, and
right.
and then we had these schemes which are fantastically, again, like Vince helped write them, like their sort of brainchild, and they made games so much more fun than at the time we had that like PDF print off of like you're always going to pick the same secondary objectives and everyone's using them, and you've got the like 5 your army can always get, and because you know what your army's capable of, and bleh. And you had these schemes instead, and it was brilliant. And I'm like, I kind of want to do that except with cheats. Like you're literally cheating.
Do it.
Like every
Yeah. So
and one of the cheats is going to be there's going to be a warp gate on every table, and you can actually go through it to other people's
Listen, the
tables.
cards are a huge innovation, because do you know what cards do? Instead of you having a huge sheet loaded with rules,
Mhm.
you only have the rule show up in front of your eyes when it's necessary. You don't need to read it before.
Mhm.
You don't need to ask for it. Never matters until it's
Well,
necessary.
it's
Saves you time. It's great.
Yeah, it's RTFC. Read the fucking card. It says what it does right on it. It's plain as day. You put it down. We both see it in the moment. We go, oh,
Yeah.
that's what the card says. Like a lot of them were like, this is your secondary. Like draw one from your deck. You write on your sheet which one you use that thing, and so you burn that one effectively. You hand it in with your sheet, right? And your opponent can go, yeah, you got that or not, because the vast majority of them are when you get this, reveal it. And so like obviously with the King's Curse, you're like hanging on to it until the end, and you're like, you might have even had to reveal the unit for the King's Curse one. That was one of the more interesting ones. There was one where like you had to like curse a terrain piece to be like the Khorne Blood Altar and murder the most stuff at it, and so you had to kill like some multiple of 8 models around the terrain piece,
good.
and you're just like, and I'm like that fucking terrain piece right there. So you like
That's narrative. That's a narrative event to me.
yeah. Well, and
So
go ahead.
if I could throw a hot take out there, because I've been
You've been just rapid. It's just a Gatling gun of hot takes tonight. I love it. Go on.
So this is where the Narrative Event Organizer Network, which was founded back in 2016 or 17, should have been better maintained by the people who founded it, because we need a central hub for organizers to be able to speak to each other and share ideas. Because what I feel happens is that narrative events exist, but they exist in their own bubbles, and the kind of general perception of the internet age community is like, well, narrative's neat and all, but no one plays it, and tournaments are everywhere, so I do that.
I'm gonna tell a story here. It was until 2018 I had heard of Raw, Realms at War, for 2 years or something. I had no idea it was a narrative event. I had heard it in Warhammer Weekly. They say, "Oh, it's amazing, it's awesome." Had no clue. Which, I mean, maybe one could say, you need to be better informed. But if I wasn't even aware, and I was trying to find narrative, you see what I mean?
Well,
Unless you're specifically told this is not a regular tournament, nobody has any clue.
Well, I mean, I don't think some people who run what I think y'all would define as like a narrative event don't think of themselves as running a narrative event. Like they don't think of it that way. Part of it is maybe just our definitions. We don't have good parlance. We don't have a good language with dealing with narrative, because matched play and competitive in the tournament scene, like people know
They have stronger language, yeah.
right. They have better language. They more podcasts are dedicated to it. Like, I mean, it's so visible. And again, it's part of it's because it's easier to talk about rules and tournaments and in a particular. Well, okay, well the tournament narrative. What is it? Who won it? Right? Like it's not what was the story of the tournament.
You can say that. You can say which was the team that won it and what happened in the story. You're right. It's not obvious. I agree. It's not obvious.
I don't.
But
I actually I
craftable.
disagree with.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I disagree.
No, you're welcome to
I
disagree
disagree with you
me.
there,
I
Matt.
encourage disagreement, man. Go on.
I don't think it's easier to talk about competitive. I think it's just that vernacular is better understood because it's been around since the 90s.
That's fair. That's fair.
And I think we just don't. It's not that it's easier to explain. Just it's a conversation we're all used to having already, and a narrative as we understand it in the Age of Sigmar is something newer. Just like Age of Sigmar itself, like that's what struck me about, we talk about narrative, like Age of Sigmar's lore hasn't had the time that 40Ks and previously fantasies had to seep in.
Mm-hmm.
So like for me, I'm very from writing Prime Dominion, like I'm very familiar with the Lumineth lore, but like as we were trying to write the setting, we're like, oh, we need to explain what the Spirefall is, because if this was fantasy, like everyone knew in fantasy, like, oh yeah, an Aryan picked up the Sword of Cain and killed all the demons, and the High Elves screwed over the world, and then they had this big falling out. Like everyone knows that already. But then when it comes to the Spirefall with Lumineth, it's like, okay, what's that? Because it was literally introduced last summer.
Mm-hmm.
Players don't have that memory. So I feel like narrative also becomes harder, because like you pick up your army book and maybe you read your lore, but you don't know everyone else's lore because the game just hasn't been around. We've got Cruel Boys now. What are Cruel Boys? What's their shtick? Like that's going to take years for this stuff that they're introducing to seep in.
To be fair, I think that's part of the appeal too. Like I think that It's a good and a bad. It's a double-edged sword. I actually love how much blank canvas is in Age of Sigmar. That's one of the things I
Oh,
love the most
absolutely.
about it. Like I love
Absolutely, I
painting
agree.
in that, and I don't think it's terrible that like I only
That's
know
what
my
we do.
army's lore, and then like I show up to you, and then I meet you, and you know your army's lore, and then we interface. I think that's actually good. I think that's fun. I think that's engaging. Whereas we took for granted some of the aspects of the world that was, and honestly it felt very stuffy to me because the lore was the
Yeah.
lore, and it was even when I was playing in the 90s, it was like I know all of this stuff, and our games
Yeah.
don't matter. Like like they would have the little
Definitely.
narrative battles from the narrative battles, right? The set battles, I think is what they called them. You'd have your set battles from something that happened in it, and you could see if you could change, and they still have these around where you can see if you change like how the history happened, but like obviously the history didn't change because then this. And so like we do that a little bit here, but narrative is your actual opportunity. Like look at Chuck Moore. Like Teyrathi is referenced in the goddamn Daughters of Cain book. He has sculpted the canon of our universe, and I'm like, he got like sort of like canonized in the battle tome. But like we all have that opportunity to leave our imprint on this setting. We all do. Every single one of us. It's in the memes and the language we gravitate towards. It's in how we
And it's
Can I jump in
it's what Animosity is
with
built
something?
around.
Yeah, go ahead.
What Chuck has done like this whole time, because this is an idea that he's been doing, but he was also kind of selling the idea, which was he has his own internal narrative, and it doesn't matter which event he goes to, which I find hard. I find hard if I'm not in a narrative event. It's like, I'm gonna change my list because it has to work better in a tournament, and it's not really my character. And he just, nah, this is how it's gonna be. And he has like a timeline for Teyrathi and the Teyrathian cult, and he explained like everything that happens builds into the story no matter what. I was like, that's bold. And
Yeah.
what Path to Glory now seems to be, let's say seems to be, is finally a tool that actually allows you to do that no matter which environment you're playing. I was like, oh wow, they actually gave us a tool to do what Chuck has been doing this whole time, and actually would motivate us a lot more to keep playing those models that are already in the Path to Glory roster when we go to a match play event. Which I think something is never, I would never have felt that motivation, but now I will.
Yeah. That's why I was careful to point out Comida Kaida that even back in the 90s, before it was 30 years old, that I still felt that the setting was stuffy, that like my possibilities were irrelevant, and maybe it was just my naivety and youth. I didn't think that I mattered that much, But I think Age of Sigmar with like Neo events, and I think we need a better common parlance.
I absolutely agree. I've been having that conversation with Nuno for months now.
I think we need a
So
better.
I want to
Go ahead.
take. So that's something that the other neos have been saying. This is a conversation that we've had with other neos as well. They've said we need a better lexicon, like a better set of terms that we cement. And this is my take on it. We need to spend time cementing terms. Like this needs work on social media, consistency of message, And I'm gonna take Alex's hot take and turn it into a lukewarm embrace take. I would like, Neos out there, chat gang, show the pictures of the events you ran and make a sentence. We did this, these were the things we did, and why it was different. And share it to the corners of the world and do this for like, I don't know, a number of months. With time, this can change because other people don't know it. Other people don't know you've done this. Yes, you might have shared it on social media, but that scrolls past super quick. I think it's important to keep showing these things. People need to have a platform to do it, and many people are neos and they do have platforms, but I wonder if a lot of people that actually know them for their hobby were aware of the narrative events that they've ran.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean that feels like a great note to end on. I think.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, I killed the show.
No, you didn't kill the show. You dropped the mic. Different, man. Like there's a mic drop. So I want you to reset a couple of these websites you mentioned for people to like dive a little bit more into narrative. We only went 1 hour and 8 minutes over the time you told me that you guys had for me tonight. So
yeah, I was going to bring that up. We've been here for 3 hours and change now, so probably time to wrap
no,
it
it was
up.
a brilliant mic drop.
A pleasure.
So yeah, share the share those links again. Like where can people find, if they're interested in the Great Weave, what are all these things? You threw some information at me tonight. I need to reset that.
So I'd like
Go
to
ahead.
start with Animosity. So, Animosity 3, the Prime Dominion, is happening. It's beginning July 14th. Coalitions on our Discord are opening for registration on July 1st. You can go to animositycampaigns.com to find out more information, including on our front page is the link to join our Discord community. And is a page we call the New Player's Guide, which will do exactly what it says on the tin. So yeah, from there I'd like to hand off to Nuno and the Narrative Event Organizer Network.
So if you go to wearetheneon.com, the Narrative Event Organizer Network, it's the website that exists is essentially a work of many Neos over the years that have contributed articles, rules, everything is there. The evidence of what they've done and rules packs and pictures and how they created it is all there. So you can go there to find out how you can do it. There's lots of tools. There's lots of links to how to make war scrolls, how to make warcry cards, that generators that are out there in the internet.
I just pulled it up and
Templates for
I see
things.
this turtle here as a terrain piece, and I'm a big fan.
That's Realms at War. That's like that needs to be shared to all the corners of the world. What they've done in Realms at War Leviathans was not even the players knew. They brought monsters and they thought that those were the Leviathans, and then they plonked those things on the table in the last day. You had to fight them. You could, I think, did they kill one? I think they said they managed to kill one.
That's fantastic.
They're literally terrain pieces, and that's the thing. It opens
The tables want you
possibilities.
dead.
Tables want you dead. Exactly.
Fantastic.
So We Are the Neon is kind of, we're trying to kind of turn it into a hub and as a promotion organism, but it's also where you can kind of, if you've never organized it, it tells you how to book a venue, how to make advertising for your event. It's essentially a lot of wisdom that has been passed down, not by me, by all the Neos that have come together, that have organized the coalescence. So that's how many of us got involved.
Mhm.
We've organized global events that everyone ran at their shop and then submitted the results to the central Neo team. And those were, I think there were 3 coalescence events. One of them was a malign portents event, and that's how I joined. That's how I got connected, because they were featured on the Warhammer community website, and it kind of changed everything. And a lot of the people that we have, not a lot of the people, a lot of the older regulars of Animosity were also coalescence alumni. So people start knowing each other over time. Uh, and there's a hub page that is still to be finished, where we're going to put a lot of content creators that create narrative and lore and tools to explore the lore of Age of Sigmar on the website. So the Great Weave, at thegreatweave.com is run by Keegan West, and it's place where you can put your character lore, your location lore, and all the things you create on your local campaigns in your background, and you can put it there, and other players can interact with it, write stories for it, and you can take other characters and use them in your own stories. There's like a form for you to ask permission, and you can contact people through the Discord group. And they're planning on also making global events so that it runs on the Discord, also kind of with submissions and people from all over the world. Then you have Narrative Labs, which is a Twitch live streaming of narrative games, um, that is run by Martin Neil Price, and they're out in Cardiff in Wales. And literally, the chat always wins. You interfere with the battle, they give you options. You can vote for the option. You can summon endless spells. You can cause penalties. So they've been running nonstop for more than a year now, multiple campaigns. They also have 40K, and they have like recurring characters. They've participated in Animosity as well. So that is something that has been a lot of fun, and all sorts of chaos ensue because now they're actually playing live in person. I think it's Martin's house. He has a whole setup,
That's
and he has
funny.
an amazing terrain trove. And and then you have Dice Sagas, which is a YouTube narrative battle report channel with full voiceover and full special effects. You see Caradron with guns blazing, with the guns with special effects, fully narrated. And if you submit to their Pocket Realm location, you can set your own realm there. Players can write this kind of stuff and submit information from their games there, and they will make videos for your lore.
That's rad.
So you write a lore, and you can send images and pictures, and they'll turn it into a narrative video that introduces your character and how they're getting into this Pocket Realm. And
What's that
for
one
sure,
again?
that's Dice Sagas.
Right on. All right, go on.
And of course, the Mortal Realms, which do an immense coverage of everything that is lore, and original neo veterans of the We Are the Neon.
I think I saw Aaron pop in here earlier, and shout outs to Paul, who's
yes.
been on the show a number of times now. I think 3 or 4 even. So
I think these are the platforms that do narrative, platforms / communities that do narrative. There are more, I'm sure. I'm definitely going to be skewered for forgetting names, but I think these are the ones that have kind of risen up or existed already.
I'm gonna interface with you all after the show to get me some of these links so that I can leave them in the video comments below. I don't think narrative and competitive are opposed to each other. I love that you've thrown down the gauntlet that Animosity is a competitive narrative event, and come check this out. I mean, even the game in my backyard, Brew City Brawl. Brendan probably doesn't consider his event narrative, but they're talking about making it a 3,000 point event right now, which is kind of stepping outside the purview of match play. And he had a bingo card last year for where you would when if you killed all your opponent's battle line and shouted "Take no prisoners" or something like that, you got a tournament point. That kind of stuff is my jam. That sort of outside the game that gives a game a flavor or a personality of its own. That stuff is already what I love about Age of Sigmar. And giving us a better way to experience and interface with each other and building a better lexicon or vernacular, I think is just essential. Not that I have a problem with talking competition and competitive play and rules. I love that stuff, but I do think we need. It seems like it's really easy to talk about hobby. You say, "Hey, this model, where's the light coming from?" And we see pictures of the hobby that dominates the game. But quite frankly, of all the content creators, the ones who dominate the most is people who do exclusively hobby stuff. And then the next slice of pie seems to be match play competitive conversation. But to get narrative, I think on equal footing feels like a noble goal for me. So
thank you.
Yeah,
I hope we're trying to walk somewhere in that direction.
Your hard sell of Animosity tonight. I'm gonna be looking at. X has been on the base for a little bit because I need to get some highlights on some stuff there.
Dude, you don't need to participate in every turn. You can just show up once in a while and do a mission.
You don't know me very well. But
I
didn't say it was addictive.
I will plug one more thing, which is that Doug from 2+ Tough is going to be doing weekly unfolding narrative reviews. So if you want to just follow along with the story, you can do that on 2+ Tough's channel.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. So, thanks for hanging out tonight. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you for having us.
For inviting us.
This was a lot of fun. I dare say this was better than our last RantCast together.
Better rapport. Although we makes for better shows, I find.
We didn't ascend Kai back out of the comments though, so I don't know if it can really be charging, right?
Learning the ABCs from Kai was really a highlight of my life, which is always charging, right?
And any conversation with Kai is a highlight of my life. So,
all right,
he just has that effect.
All right. Well, you know what? Thank you both for being on tonight. I've had a blast. Everyone else, chat gang, check out Animosity campaigns. Please do yourself an honor. I might not be able to play in it, so I need chat gang to be my will and dominate.
So that they have to give it to us on X's behalf.
Yeah, give it. They have. Yeah, you have to give it to them on X's behalf.
Whatever it may be.
Yeah, whatever it may be. Chat gang, you are the show within the show. You're the reason I do this thing. Remember to drink your milk and pay your taxes. We'll see you.